My name is Marina Helen, and I was 29 the year my family stole $45,000 from me and called it unconditional love. I am a marine biologist. I spend my days off the coast of Oahu tagging juvenile reef sharks and charting coral decay. It is salt-stained, exhausting work, but it pays exceptionally well. Well enough that I could afford to book a 14-day South Pacific luxury cruise in a grand suite on the Oceania. It was meant to be a surprise 35th anniversary gift for my parents. I put the entire fare on my personal credit card and mailed the silver-embossed booking confirmation to their Diamond Head rental in a sealed envelope. They opened it, they saw the itinerary, and they gave my gift to my sister. Welcome to Morning Revenge, where we untangle the worst family betrayals and show how dignity always has the final word. Tell me your age in the comments and let me know if you have ever had a family member take credit for your hard work. What happened on that lanai changed my relationship with my family permanently. I walked into my parents' house after a 14-hour shift. The smell of expensive citrus candles in the foyer tried to mask the scent of sea salt dried into my work shirt. My shoulders burned from hauling dive gear. I dropped my canvas bag by the front door, leaving a faint dusting of sand on the imported teak floors. From the back terrace, the sharp clink of crystal cut through the sound of the ocean waves. I stepped out onto the lanai. My mother, Victoria, stood at the head of a long dining table, holding a champagne flute. She wore a flowing silk caftan. Her hair fell in perfect, expensive waves. Beside her, my father Edward leaned against the glass railing in crisp linen trousers. Sprawled on the outdoor sectional was Serena. My 25-year-old sister curated an aesthetic of tropical leisure for an audience of fake internet followers. She tapped her manicured nails against her phone screen, not even bothering to look up when the sliding glass door shut behind me. Sitting quietly in the corner was Aunt Cassandra. My father's sister was a corporate attorney visiting from Chicago. She possessed sharp eyes and zero tolerance for my mother's country club pageantry. Cassandra gave me a brief nod, her gaze dropping to the salt stains on my boots. "You are tracking sand everywhere, Marina," my mother noted. Her smile stayed perfectly pleasant, entirely empty of warmth. "Rough shift," I said. I kept my voice steady, wiping my boots on the woven mat. "What are we celebrating?" My mother set her champagne down. She reached onto the glass table and picked up a thick brochure. Even from 10 feet away, I recognized the silver embossing on the cover. My heart slammed against my ribs, a cold knot forming tight in my stomach. "We are celebrating, Serena," Victoria announced. "Your father and I have decided she needs a reset. The influencer market is very draining on her mental health. We booked a 14-day South Pacific luxury cruise on the Oceania, a grand suite." I stared at the brochure in her hand. I knew the deck plan. I knew the exact suite number because I had selected it. I mailed it to this house labeled clearly for Victoria and Edward. They had taken my gesture, erased my name from it, and handed it to their golden child. "A 14-day cruise," I repeated. My throat felt like sandpaper. "Do not give us that look," my father interjected. He took a sip of his drink, misreading my shock for petty jealousy. "Your sister has had a tough year. She needs the relaxation. You work too much, Marina. You would hate a trip like this anyway. You do not know how to turn off. Plus, they do not exactly let you wear wetsuits to the captain's dinner," Serena chimed in. She offered a pristine pout, finally putting her phone face down. "You do not deserve the luxury, honestly. You would just spend the whole time lecturing people on the ship about coral bleaching and ruining the vibe." Aunt Cassandra shifted in her wicker chair. Her dark eyes darted from the brochure in my mother's hand to my face. She did not say a word, but her posture stiffened. She knew what I made as a senior consultant. She also knew my father's retired real estate pension could not cover a grand suite on the Oceania. The math did not add up, and Cassandra was already calculating the deficit. I looked at my mother. I waited for a flicker of guilt, a dropped gaze, any microscopic sign of remorse for hijacking a $45,000 gift. Victoria just picked up her champagne flute again. It is about Ohana Marina, family supporting each other. Serena needs this to find herself. A different daughter might have screamed. I could have snatched the silver brochure from her manicured hand and demanded the truth right there on the teak deck. I could have exposed them in front of Cassandra, but I have spent years observing apex predators in open water. I learned very early that a premature confrontation only warns the target to swim away. "You are right," I said softly. My voice came out smooth, stripped of all the exhaustion I felt moments before. "It is a beautiful ship. You should pack well, Serena." "I plan to," Serena said. Her eyes narrowed slightly, sensing she had not gotten the rise out of me she wanted. "Actually, that is why I need you to stay a minute. We need to talk about my resort wardrobe." I did not blink. I just looked at the silver brochure one last time, knowing the trap was already falling into place. My condo sits on a quiet stretch of coastline, far away from the manufactured glitz of the resort districts. I bought the 2-bedroom unit 3 years ago after securing my tenure-track position. It lacks the sprawling panoramic windows of my parents' Diamond Head rental, but the mortgage is paid from my own bank account, and the ocean is 30 steps from my back porch. It is my sanctuary. I had just finished showering the salt out of my hair and was standing at the kitchen island, reviewing temperature data sets on my laptop, when the front door swung open. Serena did not knock. She never knocks. She strolled into my living room wearing a white linen sundress and oversized designer sunglasses pushed back onto her head. She held an iced matcha latte in one hand and a stack of glossy catalogs in the other. She kicked her sandals off, leaving them right in the middle of the woven hallway runner I had just vacuumed. "You really need to give the gate guard a list of approved guests," Serena said. "He actually asked for my ID. Can you imagine the disrespect?" I closed my laptop. The hinge gave a soft click in the quiet room. "How did you get in, Serena?" "Mom gave me her spare key," she replied, breezing past the kitchen counter. She dropped the heavy stack of catalogs onto my pristine dining table. The glossy covers featured resort-wear silk evening gowns and high-end swimwear. "I came over because we have a lot of planning to do, and I know you are always busy." "Planning for what, exactly?" I asked. My voice remained level. I poured myself a glass of cold water, feeling the condensation gather on the outside of the glass. "My trip," she said. She leaned against the quartz counter, looking around my modest kitchen with a faint expression of pity. "The Oceania cruise sails in 3 weeks, Marina. It is a 14-day itinerary. Do you know how many formal nights they host on a luxury liner? 3. I need at least 4 new evening gowns, plus daywear, excursion outfits, swimsuits that look good on camera. My followers expect a certain aesthetic." I took a slow sip of my water. "And what does your wardrobe have to do with me?" Serena sighed, dropping her shoulders in a theatrical display of exhaustion. "Do not play dumb. You make 6 figures playing with fish all day. You have 0 expenses because you live like a hermit in this tiny place. Dad said you had a bonus clear last month from that coastal preservation grant." I stared at her. The sheer audacity hung in the air between us, thicker than the island humidity. My grant money was awarded to fund underwater tracking equipment. It was not a slush fund for her social media content. Serena tapped her manicured fingernail against the marble counter. "We are Ohana Marina. Family takes care of family. Mom and Dad are already paying for the suite. You are not even going on the trip. The least you can do is help me represent the Helen family properly. You know how important optics are to Mom." I set my glass down. The sharp thud echoed in the kitchen. "My salary is not your personal credit line, Serena. I am not funding your vacation wardrobe." Her posture stiffened. The sweet sister act vanished, replaced by the sharp, petulant edge she used whenever she heard the word no. "You are so selfish," she snapped. "You always have been. You sit up here on your high horse with your degrees, thinking you are better than us. You embarrass Mom and Dad. You know that, right? I crossed my arms. I embarrass them. Yes, Serena scoffed. She gestured vaguely toward my canvas dive bag resting near the laundry room. Look at you. You spend your life covered in sea slime. You smell like chum half the time. Mom cannot even brag about your job at the country club because no one there respects a woman who works manual labor in a wetsuit. They respect grace. They respect influence. I am building a brand that elevates this family. You are just dirty. The psychological chasm between us was vast and unbridgeable. In this specific pocket of suburban island life, wealth was expected to be effortless. You were supposed to lounge on a yacht, not study the ecosystem beneath it. My family worshipped the illusion of prestige, while I actually did the grueling work required to build a stable life. They hated me for reminding them of the difference. Your brand is a mirage, Serena, I said quietly. You have 20,000 followers, and half of them are paid bots. You do not elevate this family, you drain it. Serena flushed a deep, ugly red. She spun away from the kitchen and marched down the short hallway toward my bedroom. Where are you going? I demanded, stepping out from behind the island. If you are going to be a cheap bitch about buying me new clothes, then I am borrowing your things, she called back. I hurried after her. By the time I reached my bedroom doorway, she was already inside my walk-in closet. She was pulling items off the hangers with reckless disregard. She reached the top shelf, and her hand closed around the handles of my cream-colored Italian leather tote. I had purchased that bag in Milan during a marine conservation conference 2 years ago. It was my one indulgent reward to myself. This will look perfect in Fiji, Serena declared, sliding the tote onto her shoulder. It is practically brand new anyway. You never go anywhere nice enough to wear it. She turned to walk past me. I stepped directly into the center of the doorframe, the wood pressed solid against my shoulders. Take it off, I said. Move, Marina, she ordered. She tried to push past me, but I planted my feet firmly. My daily routine involved hauling oxygen tanks and restraining 50-pound aquatic predators. Serena lifted 5-pound dumbbells for her aesthetic workout videos. She bumped against my shoulder and stumbled back a step, surprised by the resistance. I said, "Take it off," I repeated. My tone dropped an octave, losing all trace of familial politeness. You are not borrowing my bag. You are not taking my clothes. You are going to walk out of my house right now. Serena clutched the leather straps, her chest heaving. You cannot treat me like this. This is supposed to be a celebration for me. Put the bag down, I commanded. I did not raise my voice, but the rigid set of my jaw made my intention clear. She glared at me, her eyes shining with sudden calculated tears. She threw the cream leather tote onto the floor. The heavy brass hardware smacked against the hardwood planks. You are sick, Serena hissed, stepping over the discarded bag. She shoved her way past me in the narrow hallway. You are a bitter, jealous spinster. No wonder you are always alone. I followed her as she marched back into the living room and snatched her iced matcha from the counter. She did not bother grabbing the stack of resort catalogs. Dad is going to hear about this, she threatened, stopping at the front door. I am telling him you put your hands on me. I am telling him you are abusing me because you are jealous of my trip. You are going to regret this, Marina. I promise you. She slammed the front door so hard the framed ocean photographs on the living room wall rattled against the plaster. I stood alone in the sudden silence of my condo. The air still smelled faintly of her coconut perfume. She was going to tell our father. She was going to spin a narrative of victimhood and provoke him into a rage. That was her signature move. But as I walked back into my bedroom and picked my Italian leather tote off the floor, I felt no fear. Let her call him, I thought, smoothing the creased leather. Let them all come. I walked back into the kitchen and opened my laptop. It was time to look at my bank accounts. My phone buzzed against the quartz countertop, sounding like a warning siren. The screen illuminated the caller ID. Edward Helen. My father rarely reached out to me directly unless he needed something fixed or financed. I swiped the green icon and brought the device to my ear. "Marina, what is wrong with you?" his voice barked through the speaker. He skipped any greeting, launching straight into the reprimand. Serena arrived home in tears. She claims you physically blocked her from leaving your bedroom and screamed at her over a simple favor. I pinched the bridge of my nose. "She tried to steal my Italian leather tote, Dad. When I caught her, she threw a tantrum. Nobody screamed except your golden child." "Do not use that disrespectful tone with me," he demanded. The baseline hum of his anger vibrated through the receiver. "Your sister is under an immense amount of pressure, preparing for this voyage. She asked for a minor contribution toward her packing list, and you treated her like a criminal. We raised you to embrace Ohana. We taught you to share your blessings. Instead, you behave like a miser, hoarding your wealth, while your own flesh and blood struggles." Struggles. The word hung in the air. Serena spent her mornings filming iced coffee reviews and her afternoons lounging by the resort pool. I spent my days analyzing marine degradation patterns under a scorching tropical sun. "I am not outfitting her vacation," I stated, keeping my volume perfectly flat. "Listen to me very carefully," my father snarled, dropping his register to intimidate. "You have upset your sister deeply. You have ruined the celebratory mood of this household. If you want to remain part of this family, you will make this right. I expect you to wire $5,000 into her checking ledger by tonight. Consider it an apology for your unacceptable behavior." Before I could utter a single syllable of refusal, he terminated the connection. The line went dead. I lowered the smartphone. A heavy, suffocating silence settled over the kitchen. For a brief second, the lingering ghost of the obedient daughter wanted to cry. I wanted to ask why my efforts were never enough to earn their affection, but tears never surfaced. The sheer audacity of his extortion attempt burned away any residual sorrow, leaving behind a stark, icy clarity. I opened my laptop. I intended to log into my primary banking portal to sever the automatic linkage between my profile and the family network. I navigated to the financial dashboard. The screen loaded, displaying my portfolio. My eyes scanned past my direct deposit ledger and landed on the secondary reserve line. My breath caught in my throat. The secondary reserve was a legacy joint account. We opened it during my sophomore year at university. Victoria required her name on the paperwork as a co-signer to funnel emergency funds while I studied abroad. After graduation, I kept the structure intact. I used it as a high-yield holding pen for project bonuses and consulting fees. Because my primary checking handled daily living expenses, I rarely monitored the legacy balance. According to my mental arithmetic, it should have held roughly $80,000. The bold digital font displayed a current available balance of $412. My vision blurred for a fraction of a second. I blinked rapidly, forcing the interface back into sharp focus. I clicked the ledger, expanding the transaction history for the past 6 months. A sickening cascade of unauthorized withdrawals populated the monitor. They were not anonymous hack attempts. The vendor names read like a catalog of my parents' extravagant lifestyle. There were recurring automated clearinghouse pulls for the Diamond Head Country Club monthly dues. There were huge point-of-sale swipes at luxury boutiques matching the exact designer labels Serena flaunted online. There were hefty installments paid to a premium German auto financing firm, covering my father's recent car lease. They had not merely hijacked my cruise booking. They systematically bled my life savings dry to finance their illusion of superiority. My mother weaponized her legacy access to treat my grueling underwater labor as her personal slush fund. The initial shock morphed into a lethal clinical detachment. The marine biologist inside me took over. When tracking a parasitic infection in a reef system, you do not panic. You gather data, you isolate the variables, you document the spread before you excise the rot. I navigated to the Export tab. I meticulously downloaded 36 months of PDF statements. I sorted the records by date, highlighting every fraudulent transfer, every suspicious swipe, and every unauthorized wire. I compiled the evidence into a secure, encrypted folder on my local drive. I was no longer a daughter trying to win her parents' love. I was a forensic auditor building a watertight case. An hour later, my mobile chimed with a text message from Aunt Cassandra. It contained a pinpoint location for a quiet coffee shop near the Alawai boat harbor. I packed my computer into my canvas satchel and drove down the coast. The cafe was a rustic, open-air establishment, smelling of roasted Kona beans and salty trade winds. Cassandra sat at a corner table nursing a dark espresso. She wore a tailored linen suit that looked completely out of place among the tourists in floral shirts. "You look like you just watched a shark devour a dolphin," Cassandra observed as I pulled out a metal chair and sat down. I opened my satchel and retrieved my tablet. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I unlocked the screen and slid the device across the scratched wooden table. "Look at the highlighted rows," I instructed. Cassandra adjusted her designer reading glasses. She scanned the digital pages. Her sharp features remained composed, but the slight tightening of her jaw betrayed her disgust. She scrolled through a year of extravagant theft. "Your mother never surrendered her access to your college fund," Cassandra murmured, tracing a massive withdrawal labeled Resort Spa Services. "And Edward has been using your sweat equity to cover his golf memberships. They siphoned nearly 80 grand, plus the 45,000 I spent on their anniversary cruise," I added. "The trip they just handed to Serena. Dad called me an hour ago, demanding another 5,000 in hush money to apologize for making my sister cry." Cassandra let out a harsh, humorless laugh. The entitlement is almost majestic in its delusion. She locked the display and handed it back to me. "So, what is your next move, Marina? Are you going to storm into their rental and demand restitution?" "I want to burn their entire facade to the ground." I admitted, feeling the raw heat of betrayal simmering beneath my ribcage. "I want to call the police right now." "Do not do that," Cassandra advised. Leaning forward, she folded her manicured hands over her coffee cup. Her voice dropped into the pragmatic tone she utilized in corporate litigation. "If you confront them now, Victoria will spin a web of plausible deniability. She will claim you verbally authorized those expenditures. She will leverage her maternal status to paint you as a confused, ungrateful child. Edward will hide the remaining assets." "Then how do I stop them?" I asked. Cassandra offered a razor-thin smile. "You let them hit a brick wall at full speed. Never interrupt a thief when they are busy exposing themselves. They are entirely dependent on your capital to maintain their daily illusion. Right now, they think they possess infinite access to your wealth. Cut the supply lines silently. Let them discover the drought when they are standing at a cash register." The brilliant simplicity of her strategy washed over me. I nodded, pulling my smartphone from my pocket. I dialed the premier customer service tier for my banking institution. The automated voice prompted me for my security credentials. I punched in my PIN code. A live representative answered. "Thank you for calling Premier Support. How may I assist you today, Miss Helen?" "I need to execute a hard administrative block on my secondary reserve account," I stated, keeping my eyes locked on Cassandra's approving gaze. "No outbound transfers. No automated clearinghouse pulls, no debit authorizations. I want a total freeze on all exiting capital, effective immediately." "Understood," the representative replied, typing rapidly in the background. "Does this freeze apply to the joint authorized user Victoria Helen as well?" "Especially her," I confirmed. "Any card attached to that ledger must decline at the point of sale." The representative finalized the security protocol. "The freeze is active, Miss Helen. No funds will leave that account without your direct biometric authorization." I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The financial guillotine was primed. My parents spent 6 months treating my bank account like an endless fountain of youth. Tomorrow morning, they were going to wake up in a very dry desert. I took a slow sip of my ice water, feeling genuinely thirsty for the first time all day. I wondered which one of Serena's luxury purchases would be the first to bounce. My phone buzzed against the quartz countertop, sounding like a warning siren. The screen illuminated the caller ID. Edward Helen. My father rarely reached out to me directly unless he needed something fixed or financed. I swiped the green icon and brought the device to my ear. "Marina, what is wrong with you?" his voice barked through the speaker. He skipped any greeting, launching straight into the reprimand. "Serena arrived home in tears. She claims you physically blocked her from leaving your bedroom and screamed at her over a simple favor." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "She tried to steal my Italian leather tote, Dad. When I caught her, she threw a tantrum." "Nobody screamed, except your golden child." "Do not use that disrespectful tone with me," he demanded. The baseline hum of his anger vibrated through the receiver. "Your sister is under an immense amount of pressure preparing for this voyage. She asked for a minor contribution toward her packing list, and you treated her like a criminal. We raised you to embrace Ohana. We taught you to share your blessings. Instead, you behave like a miser hoarding your wealth while your own flesh and blood struggles." Struggles. The word hung in the air. Serena spent her mornings filming iced coffee reviews and her afternoons lounging by the resort pool. I spent my days analyzing marine degradation patterns under a scorching tropical sun. "I am not outfitting her vacation," I stated, keeping my volume perfectly flat. "Listen to me very carefully," my father snarled, dropping his register to intimidate. "You have upset your sister deeply. You have ruined the celebratory mood of this household. If you want to remain part of this family, you will make this right. I expect you to wire $5,000 into her checking ledger by tonight. Consider it an apology for your unacceptable behavior." Before I could utter a single syllable of refusal, he terminated the connection. The line went dead. I lowered the smartphone. A heavy, suffocating silence settled over the kitchen. For a brief second, the lingering ghost of the obedient daughter wanted to cry. I wanted to ask why my efforts were never enough to earn their affection, but tears never surfaced. The sheer audacity of his extortion attempt burned away any residual sorrow, leaving behind a stark, icy clarity. I opened my laptop. I intended to log into my primary banking portal to sever the automatic linkage between my profile and the family network. I navigated to the financial dashboard. The screen loaded, displaying my portfolio. My eyes scanned past my direct deposit ledger and landed on the secondary reserve line. My breath caught in my throat. The secondary reserve was a legacy joint account. We opened it during my sophomore year at university. Victoria required her name on the paperwork as a co-signer to funnel emergency funds while I studied abroad. After graduation, I kept the structure intact. I used it as a high-yield holding pen for project bonuses and consulting fees. Because my primary checking handled daily living expenses, I rarely monitored the legacy balance. According to my mental arithmetic, it should have held roughly $80,000. The bold digital font displayed a current available balance of $412. My vision blurred for a fraction of a second. I blinked rapidly, forcing the interface back into sharp focus. I clicked the ledger, expanding the transaction history for the past 6 months. A sickening cascade of unauthorized withdrawals populated the monitor. They were not anonymous hack attempts. The vendor names read like a catalog of my parents' extravagant lifestyle. There were recurring automated clearinghouse pulls for the Diamond Head Country Club monthly dues. There were huge point-of-sale swipes at luxury boutiques matching the exact designer labels Serena flaunted online. There were hefty installments paid to a premium German auto financing firm covering my father's recent car lease. They had not merely hijacked my cruise booking, they systematically bled my life savings dry to finance their illusion of superiority. My mother weaponized her legacy access to treat my grueling underwater labor as her personal slush fund. The initial shock morphed into a lethal clinical detachment. The marine biologist inside me took over. When tracking a parasitic infection in a reef system, you do not panic. You gather data. You isolate the variables. You document the spread before you excise the rot. I navigated to the Export tab. I meticulously downloaded 36 months of PDF statements. I sorted the records by date, highlighting every fraudulent transfer, every suspicious swipe, and every unauthorized wire. I compiled the evidence into a secure encrypted folder on my local drive. I was no longer a daughter trying to win her parents' love. I was a forensic auditor building a watertight case. An hour later, my mobile chimed with a text message from Aunt Cassandra. It contained a pinpoint location for a quiet coffee shop near the Alawai boat harbor. I packed my computer into my canvas satchel and drove down the coast. The cafe was a rustic, open-air establishment smelling of roasted Kona beans and salty trade winds. Cassandra sat at a corner table nursing a dark espresso. She wore a tailored linen suit that looked completely out of place among the tourists in floral shirts. "You look like you just watched a shark devour a dolphin," Cassandra observed as I pulled out a metal chair and sat down. I opened my satchel and retrieved my tablet. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I unlocked the screen and slid the device across the scratched wooden table. "Look at the highlighted rows," I instructed. Cassandra adjusted her designer reading glasses. She scanned the digital pages. Her sharp features remained composed, but the slight tightening of her jaw betrayed her disgust. She scrolled through a year of extravagant theft. "Your mother never surrendered her access to your college fund," Cassandra murmured, tracing a massive withdrawal labeled Resort Spa Services. "And Edward has been using your sweat equity to cover his golf memberships. They siphoned nearly 80 grand, plus the 45,000 I spent on their anniversary cruise," I added. "The trip they just handed to Serena. Dad called me an hour ago demanding another 5,000 in hush money to apologize for making my sister cry." Cassandra let out a harsh, humorless laugh. The entitlement is almost majestic in its delusion. She locked the display and handed it back to me. "So what is your next move, Marina? Are you going to storm into their rental and demand restitution?" "I want to burn their entire facade to the ground," I admitted, feeling the raw heat of betrayal simmering beneath my ribcage. "I want to call the police right now." "Do not do that," Cassandra advised, leaning forward. She folded her manicured hands over her coffee cup. Her voice dropped into the pragmatic tone she utilized in corporate litigation. "If you confront them now, Victoria will spin a web of plausible deniability. She will claim you verbally authorized those expenditures. She will leverage her maternal status to paint you as a confused, ungrateful child. Edward will hide the remaining assets." "Then how do I stop them?" I asked. Cassandra offered a razor-thin smile. "You let them hit a brick wall at full speed. Never interrupt a thief when they are busy exposing themselves. They are entirely dependent on your capital to maintain their daily illusion. Right now, they think they possess infinite access to your wealth. Cut the supply lines silently. Let them discover the drought when they are standing at a cash register." The brilliant simplicity of her strategy washed over me. I nodded, pulling my smartphone from my pocket. I dialed the premier customer service tier for my banking institution. The automated voice prompted me for my security credentials. I punched in my PIN code. A live representative answered. "Thank you for calling Premier Support. How may I assist you today, Miss Helen?" "I need to execute a hard administrative block on my secondary reserve account," I stated, keeping my eyes locked on Cassandra's approving gaze. "No outbound transfers, no automated clearinghouse pulls, no debit authorizations. I want a total freeze on all exiting capital, effective immediately." "Understood," the representative replied, typing rapidly in the background. "Does this freeze apply to the joint authorized user, Victoria Helen, as well?" "Especially her," I confirmed. Any card attached to that ledger must decline at the point of sale. The representative finalized the security protocol. The freeze is active, Miss Helen. No funds will leave that account without your direct biometric authorization. I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The financial guillotine was primed. My parents spent 6 months treating my bank account like an endless fountain of youth. Tomorrow morning, they were going to wake up in a very dry desert. I took a slow sip of my ice water, feeling genuinely thirsty for the first time all day. I wondered which one of Serena's luxury purchases would be the first to bounce. The fluorescent lights hummed a steady low pitch above my desk at the research facility the next morning. I spent the early hours inputting coral bleaching metrics into the central database. The methodical nature of the task usually centered my mind, but today my fingers felt stiff against the keyboard. My pulse still thumped a hard, irregular rhythm. I was waiting for the financial freeze to hit my parents. I did not expect the next attack to come from an entirely different direction. My office phone rang. The caller identification screen displayed the name Marcus Thorne. Marcus owned the largest fleet of ecotourism vessels on the island. He was a respected veteran of the maritime industry and a crucial partner for my conservation grants. He provided the specialized boats my team required to transport delicate tagging equipment into deep water. His cooperation was vital to my career. I picked up the receiver, forcing a professional tone. "Good morning, Marcus. How are the new hull modifications holding up on the primary vessel?" A heavy silence stretched across the line. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice lacked its usual warm island cadence. It was stiff and distinctly guarded. "I am confused, Marina. I received a rather aggressive correspondence from your official institutional address this morning. I wanted to verify the request before I forwarded it to the ethics board." My stomach plummeted. A cold sweat broke out across my shoulder blades. "What correspondence, Marcus? I have not sent you any requisitions this week." He sighed, sounding deeply disappointed. "The email demands a complimentary 2-week charter of my luxury catamaran for a VIP influencer event. The sender claims that since your research grants bring my company positive press, I owe your family a free Tier 1 upgrade. The message explicitly threatens to pull your institutional contract if I do not comply. It was signed with your official digital signature block." The air vanished from my lungs. The sterile white walls of my office seemed to tilt inward. I remembered Serena standing in my kitchen yesterday afternoon. I had left my laptop open on the quartz island when I chased her down the hallway to protect my leather tote. She had been alone with my unlocked workstation for less than 2 minutes. That was all the time she needed to locate my partner directory and fire off an extortion demand. "Marcus, I swear to you, I did not write that email," I said. My voice trembled with genuine panic. "My sister entered my home uninvited yesterday. She accessed my open terminal while I was in another room. Please, you know my character. I would never leverage my scientific credentials to secure a yacht. I would never threaten our partnership." I listened to him breathe. The seconds crawled by agonizingly slow. My entire professional reputation dangled over a precipice. The Institute maintained strict anti-corruption policies. If Marcus submitted that email to the ethics board, I would face immediate termination. Everything I built over 7 grueling years would evaporate. "I believe you," Marina, Marcus finally said. His tone softened marginally. "The grammar was terrible, and it did not sound like your voice. But you need to understand the position this puts me in. You cannot have unvetted individuals launching shakedowns from your official server. Secure your hardware. If this happens again, I will have no choice but to sever our contract." I apologized profusely. I promised him it was an isolated security breach and thanked him for his grace. When I hung up the phone, my hands shook so violently I had to press them flat against the edge of my laminate desk. My parents stealing my money was a brutal betrayal, but my sister weaponizing my professional identity to demand free luxury excursions crossed a threshold into active sabotage. They were no longer just parasites draining my wallet. They were a localized infection actively destroying the host. I grabbed my car keys and walked out of the facility. I did not bother telling my supervisor I was taking an early lunch. The drive to Diamond Head took 20 minutes. I gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned a bruised shade of white. I bypassed the security gate using my registered family code and pulled into the paved circular driveway. I did not knock. I pushed the heavy mahogany front door open and stepped into the foyer. The scene in the living room looked like a luxury retail display exploded across the floor. 6 pieces of brand new hard-shell designer luggage sat in the center of the imported rug. The matching set gleamed in a metallic champagne hue. Serena knelt beside the largest suitcase, carefully packing a row of expensive stiletto heels into custom fabric dust bags. My mother, Victoria, sat on the plush white sofa holding a clipboard. She was casually checking items off a printed packing list while sipping sparkling water with a twist of lime. They looked perfectly at peace. They looked like people who had not a single care in the world, funded entirely by a bank account they did not own. Serena looked up when my shadow fell across the carpet. She offered a smug, self-satisfied smirk. "Did you come to apologize? Because I am very busy finalizing my excursion wardrobe, and I do not have time for your negativity today." I bypassed her entirely and stepped closer to the sofa. "You used my work computer," I stated. My voice was dangerously quiet. "You sent an extortion email to a marine vendor threatening my institutional contract so you could get a free boat ride." Serena rolled her eyes and tucked a strand of highlighted hair behind her ear. "Oh, please, do not be so dramatic. I just leveraged our family connections. You never use your perks. I have a brand to build, and a catamaran party would generate amazing content for my followers. You should be sharing your resources instead of hoarding them. You committed fraud," I corrected her. "You jeopardized my career. If Marcus had reported that email to the ethics board, I would have been fired this morning." Victoria set her clipboard down on the glass coffee table. She let out a long, exasperated sigh, as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum over a broken toy. "Marina, lower your voice. You are stressing your sister out right before her voyage." Serena was merely being resourceful. "You have a very mundane job, honey. You study fish. If your little science project can finally provide a tangible benefit for this family, you should be honored to help her." I stared at the woman who birthed me. I searched her pristine, perfectly contoured face for any hint of irony. There was none. Victoria genuinely believed my rigorous academic career was nothing more than a stepping stone to secure VIP treatment for her favorite child. She viewed my integrity as a currency meant to be spent on their leisure. "You think my career is mundane?" I asked. The anger inside me crystallized, turning into something heavy and impenetrable. "You think I exist just to fund this illusion. Do not start this again," my mother warned. Her pleasant facade slipped, revealing the harsh, demanding matriarch beneath. "We raised you. We provided for you. The least you can do is support your sister's success without complaining. Now excuse yourself. We have a lot of packing left to do." I looked at the shiny, champagne-colored suitcases. I looked at the silver-embossed Oceania cruise brochure resting proudly on the kitchen island. They were packing for a trip paid for by my credit card. They were preparing to celebrate a life financed by my stolen savings. They believed they were untouchable. "I am not complaining anymore," I said softly. I took one step backward, retreating toward the foyer. "Have a wonderful afternoon, preparing for your journey." Serena scoffed, tossing a designer swimsuit into the open luggage. "That is what I thought. Close the door on your way out. You are letting the humidity ruin my hair." I walked out into the glaring tropical sunlight. I pulled the heavy mahogany door shut behind me, listening to the solid click of the locking mechanism. The heat of the pavement radiated through the soles of my shoes. I unlocked my car and slid into the driver's seat, but I did not start the engine immediately. Instead, I pulled my smartphone from my pocket. I stared at the dashboard. My boundaries had been trampled. My bank account had been pillaged. My professional reputation had been placed on a chopping block. They had taken everything they could reach and demanded I smile while they did it. I opened my digital wallet and tapped the icon for my premium credit card provider. I stared at the $35,000 balance waiting to be cleared at the end of the billing cycle. I was done groveling for their basic respect. I was done trying to buy a seat at their table. I pressed the call button to connect with the Oceania concierge department. The phone rang twice. It was time to pull the plug on the entire operation. The drive back to the research facility felt remarkably short. My pulse, which had been drumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs earlier, now slowed into a steady, deliberate beat. I parked my car in the staff lot. The midday sun baked the asphalt, radiating heat in shimmering waves, but I felt entirely cold. I walked into my office, shut the heavy, fireproof door, and locked it. The sterile hum of the fluorescent lights offered a strange comfort. I sat at my desk and placed my smartphone flat on the laminate surface. I retrieved the silver-embossed Oceania brochure from my memory. I did not need the physical booklet. The concierge contact number was burned into my brain. I dialed the elite customer care line and activated the speaker function. A refined classical melody played for exactly 12 seconds before a live representative answered. Thank you for calling the Oceania Diamond Concierge Desk. My name is Valerie. How may I provide you with exceptional service today? My name is Marina Helen, I said. I need to manage a reservation booked under my primary account profile. Of course, Miss Helen, Valerie replied, her tone dripping with practiced hospitality. May I have the booking reference number to access your itinerary? I provided the alphanumeric code. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard on the other end of the line. Thank you, Valerie said. I see a 14-day South Pacific Grand Suite reservation departing in 3 weeks. The passenger manifest lists Victoria Helen and Edward Helen with a recent name change request, adding Serena Helen. How can we assist you with this spectacular voyage? I need to void the itinerary, I stated, keeping my voice devoid of emotion. Cancel the reservation entirely. The typing stopped. A brief pause followed. I understand, Miss Helen. However, because we are within the 30-day departure window, standard policy dictates a 50% penalty fee for late cancellations. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the desk. This is where the trap required precision. I am the primary cardholder, Valerie. I paid the $45,000 fare in full. However, I am not a passenger on that manifest, and I did not authorize the recent passenger name swap. My family obtained the booking confirmation without my consent. I am flagging this transaction for unauthorized modification and potential familiar fraud. The atmosphere on the call shifted instantly. The luxury hospitality tone vanished, replaced by strict financial compliance protocols. I apologize for the distress, Miss Helen, Valerie said, her voice dropping into a serious professional register. Unauthorized passenger swaps violate our strict security guidelines. Because you are the sole funding source and you are declaring the current manifest invalid, I can override the penalty tier. We will process a full refund. I want the funds routed to a different destination I instructed. I read off the routing and account numbers for the new secure ledger Cassandra had helped me establish yesterday. Consider it done, the agent confirmed. Before I finalize the void, our fraud prevention protocol requires me to notify the current primary contact on the passenger manifest that their boarding passes are officially revoked. The file lists a mobile number for Victoria Helen. I will dispatch that notification immediately. Thank you, Valerie, I said. I ended the call. I knew my mother. I knew her habits. On a Tuesday afternoon, she would be at the country club sipping iced tea or getting a hot stone massage. She frequently left her mobile device on the kitchen counter at the Diamond Head rental. Serena practically lived in that kitchen when she broadcasted her lifestyle content because the natural lighting highlighted her cheekbones. I opened a new browser tab on my computer and navigated to Serena's social media profile. A red glowing ring circled her profile picture, indicating she was currently broadcasting a live video. I clicked the icon. The screen expanded. Serena sat at the quartz island in my parents' kitchen. The 6 pieces of champagne-colored designer luggage were arranged artistically in the background. She wore a silk kimono robe and held a crystal flute of sparkling cider, holding it up to the camera as if making a toast. The viewer count hovered around 300, mostly bots and a few dozen local girls she sought to impress. "I have been working so hard on my brand this year," Serena told her audience, her voice dripping with artificial humility. "You guys know how draining content creation can be. It takes a toll on your spirit. So I decided to treat myself to the ultimate reset, 14 days in a grand suite on the Oceania. It is all about manifesting your worth. When you demand luxury, the universe provides." A stream of heart emojis floated up the side of the screen. I watched her bask in the unearned validation. She tilted her head, adjusting her angle to catch the sunlight streaming through the panoramic windows. Suddenly, a sharp digital ringing pierced the audio feed. Serena's eyes darted off camera. "Oh, hold on, you guys," she chirped. "That is my mom's phone. It is probably the cruise concierge calling to confirm our VIP excursion preferences. Let me put them on speaker so you can hear how elite the service is." She reached out of the frame and pulled Victoria's ringing phone onto the counter. She tapped the screen, answering the call and activating the loudspeaker. "Hello, this is the Helen residence," Serena purred, leaning toward the microphone so her viewers would not miss a single word of her VIP treatment. "Good afternoon," a crisp, professional voice echoed through the kitchen. The agent sounded different from Valerie, indicating the file had been escalated to the actual fraud department. "I am calling from the Oceania Security and Compliance Division. Am I speaking with Victoria Helen? She is not available, but I am her daughter, Serena. I am the primary passenger on the Grand Suite booking. You can speak with me." She smiled at the camera, giving her viewers a smug wink. "Very well, Serena," the security agent said. "I am calling to inform you that your upcoming 14-day South Pacific itinerary has been flagged for unauthorized access. The primary cardholder has formally revoked your boarding privileges. Your reservation is now voided." Serena's smug smile froze. Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around the stem of her crystal flute. The chat box on the side of my screen abruptly stopped scrolling. The silence on the live stream was profound. "I am sorry, what are you talking about?" Serena stammered. Her curated influencer voice cracked, sliding into genuine panic. "We are fully booked. My parents paid for this trip." "Negative," the agent corrected flatly, showing zero tolerance for the lie. "The $45,000 fare was remitted by Marina Helen. Miss Helen contacted our fraud department moments ago to report that you intercepted the booking credentials without her consent. Pursuant to our financial protection policies, Marina Helen has executed a full cancellation. No funds remain on the account. You do not have a suite. If you attempt to board the vessel, security will turn you away. We consider this matter closed. Have a pleasant day." The line disconnected with a sharp click. For 5 agonizing seconds, Serena just stared at the phone. Her viewers heard every single word. The chat box suddenly exploded. The comments blurred past at lightning speed. Wait, she did not even pay for it. Did her sister just cancel her trip on speakerphone? Oh my God, she is a total fraud. Manifesting your worth with stolen money, LOL. Serena read the comments, her face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. The pristine illusion she spent years cultivating shattered into a million digital pieces, broadcast live to the very people she tried to make jealous. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had no cruise. She had no luxury content. She had just been exposed as a parasite in front of her entire audience. "No," Serena gasped. She grabbed the phone frantically, tapping the screen as if she could erase the call. "No, no, no, this is a mistake." The comments grew crueler, mocking her panic. She looked up at the camera lens, her eyes wide with a feral, desperate terror. The elegant tropical influencer vanished. "Shut it off!" she shrieked, slapping her hand over the camera lens. The stream went dark, but the microphone remained active for one final second, capturing a raw, guttural scream of pure humiliation before the broadcast abruptly ended. I sat in my quiet office, staring at the black screen. A deep, profound satisfaction washed over me, settling into my bones. The heavy weight I had carried since stepping onto that lanai yesterday finally lifted. I had taken back my money. I had stripped away her unearned pride, but the satisfaction was brief. The Oceania agent had lit the fuse, and Serena had broadcast the explosion. My parents were going to find out their golden child was a laughingstock, and their luxury vacation was gone. They would not reflect on their own theft. They would only see my retaliation. I closed the browser tab and reached for my car keys. The war had officially started, and they knew exactly where I lived. I drove straight home from the research facility. My hands gripped the leather steering wheel with enough force to make my joints ache. I knew the digital shockwave from the disastrous livestream would hit the Diamond Head rental within minutes. My gated community usually offered a comforting sense of isolation. The entry required a resident barcode, and the security guard rarely allowed unannounced visitors past the iron gates. I parked my vehicle in my assigned spot and walked up the outdoor staircase to my second-floor unit. I unlocked the deadbolt and stepped inside, letting the quiet atmosphere wash over me. The coastal breeze drifted through the open balcony window, carrying the scent of salt and blooming hibiscus. I poured a glass of cold water and stood by the kitchen island. I needed a moment to ground myself before planning my next strategic move. 10 minutes later, heavy fists pounded against my front entrance. The wood rattled violently against the doorframe. They had tailgated a neighbor through the security checkpoint. "Open this door, Marina!" my father's voice boomed through the exterior hallway. The sound echoed off the stucco walls. I did not rush. I set my glass down on the smooth quartz counter. I took a slow, deep breath, anchoring my feet to the floorboards. I walked toward the entryway and turned the deadbolt. The door flew open before I could even pull the brass handle back. Edward pushed his way into my home, carrying a storm of fury with him. Victoria followed close behind her husband. The pristine country club facade they usually projected had melted away entirely. My father breathed heavily, his face flushed a dark, mottled red. My mother clutched her expensive designer handbag so tightly, her knuckles jutted out sharp and pale against her skin. "You have lost your mind," my father snarled. He stepped into my living space, crowding my personal boundary. The scent of his heavy, expensive cologne filled the room, suffocating the fresh ocean breeze. "Serena is having a panic attack in her bedroom. Her entire digital network watched you humiliate her on a live broadcast. Do you have any idea what you just did to her reputation? To our anniversary celebration?" I kept my posture rigid. "I canceled the vacation I paid for," I stated, keeping my tone devoid of any emotional inflection. "You acted out of pure spite," Victoria snapped. She stepped around Edward and pointed a manicured finger directly at my chest. "You were jealous that we chose to reward your sister for her hard work. You called that concierge desk and weaponized your credit card to destroy a beautiful family milestone. Serena is inconsolable right now. Her followers are leaving vile, mocking comments on her page. You are going to pick up your phone right now, call that cruise line, and reinstate the Grand Suite. I do not care what penalty fees you have to pay to fix this. You will restore her booking, Marina." I stared at them. The sheer, staggering entitlement hung in the air thicker than the midday island humidity. My father did not ask why I voided the ticket. My mother did not apologize for intercepting my personal mail. They did not even acknowledge that the luxury fare belonged to me in the first place. They only cared about the public embarrassment Serena suffered. I turned my back to them. I walked over to the kitchen island and picked up a thick manila envelope. I had printed the financial documents right after my coffee meeting with Aunt Cassandra. I walked back into the living room and held the envelope out. Edward snatched it from my grip with a harsh, aggressive motion. He tore the paper flap open, pulling out the thick stack of banking records. "Read the highlighted lines," I instructed. My voice carried a lethal, icy calm. "Those are the transactional statements from my Legacy College reserve. The account holding my grant bonuses and project consulting fees. The account you two have been quietly draining for the past 6 months." Edward scanned the top page. His eyes darted across the rows of luxury boutique purchases, country club monthly dues, and premium auto financing withdrawals. The red flush on his neck deepened, but he did not look ashamed. He looked profoundly irritated that his secret pipeline had been exposed. Victoria peered over his shoulder. She recognized her own distinct signature on the resort spa receipts. She did not flinch or look away. She simply lifted her chin and met my gaze with absolute cold defiance. "Do not look at us like we committed a crime," Victoria scoffed. She smoothed the front of her silk blouse, banishing a tiny invisible wrinkle. "We raised you, Marina. We paid for your braces. We fed you and housed you and drove you to your little science camps when you were a child. You owe us for the comfortable life you currently enjoy. That money was family capital. We used it to maintain our household standards. You make a 6-figure salary tracking fish in the ocean. You can easily afford to contribute to your parents' lifestyle." I felt a profound, sickening clarity wash over my mind. There was no misunderstanding left to resolve. There was no parental love left to salvage. They viewed me strictly as a financial utility. I was nothing more than a walking, automated teller machine designed to fund their vanity and Serena's endless leisure. "Get out of my house," I commanded, pointing toward the open front entrance. "We are not leaving until you fix Serena's trip," Edward growled. He tossed the bank statements onto my glass coffee table. The papers scattered across the transparent surface, sliding over one another. "You are going to call the Maritime Company. You are going to apologize to your sister for your cruel stunt. And you are going to stop this ridiculous tantrum over a few shared expenses." I took a deliberate step toward him. "I spend my days wrestling apex predators into submission," I reminded him. My tone dropped into a low, dangerous register that commanded immediate attention. "I am not intimidated by a retired real estate broker throwing a fit in my living room. If you do not walk out that door in the next 10 seconds, I am calling the island police. I will hand the responding officers those bank statements, and I will press formal charges for wire fraud. Now get out." Edward stared at me. He searched my face for any sign of hesitation. He recognized the immovable resolve in my eyes. He realized the obedient, accommodating daughter was truly dead. He took a slow step backward toward the threshold. Victoria followed him, her face twisting into an ugly, bitter sneer. They had lost the immediate skirmish, but Edward stopped right in the doorway. He reached out and placed his hand flat against the wooden doorframe. A slow, chilling smirk spread across his face, replacing his previous rage with something far more calculating. "You think you hold all the cards because you froze a checking account," my father said softly. His voice dripped with malicious confidence. "You think you can kick us out of this condo and dictate the terms of our relationship. You seem to have forgotten the specific paperwork we signed when you bought this place, Marina. You needed a guarantor to secure the favorable mortgage rate. Your mother co-signed the original loan." A cold spike of adrenaline shot through my veins. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I kept my facial expression entirely blank, refusing to show the sudden surge of fear blooming in my chest. "The property deed still bears her name." Edward continued his smirk, widening into a grin of pure predatory triumph. "This is not your house. This is Victoria's property. You are just a guest living under her roof. You want to play hardball over a vacation fare? Fine. We will play by your new rules. You have until Monday morning to repurchase that grand suite for your sister. If you do not comply with our demands, we are calling our attorney. We will serve you with a formal eviction notice. We will sell this beachfront unit and we will use the equity to fund our lifestyle." He pulled the front door shut. The heavy wood slammed against the frame, leaving me standing alone in the deafening silence of my living room. I looked around at the gleaming quartz counters, the woven coastal rugs, and the framed ocean photography hanging on the walls. I had poured my heart and my savings into building this sanctuary. My father had just threatened to strip it all away with a single legal technicality. The war was no longer about a hijacked luxury vacation. The conflict was no longer about a drained bank account or a ruined social media broadcast. The entire battlefield had shifted beneath my feet. As I stared at the scattered financial documents on my coffee table, I realized the war was about real estate now. The echo of the slamming door faded into the quiet corners of my living room. I stood alone on the woven runner, staring at the empty entryway. Panic is a biological response to sudden environmental threats. I felt the initial spike of adrenaline flood my system, but I trained my brain years ago to process fear as raw, actionable data. Edward threatened to evict me from my own sanctuary. He believed the original property deed gave Victoria ultimate authority over my residence. He was relying on a financial snapshot from 3 years ago and an assumption that I was foolish enough to leave my assets unprotected. I walked down the short hallway to my home office. I opened a fireproof metal lockbox hidden in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. I pulled out a thick blue folder containing my real estate records and title history. I sent a brief text message to Aunt Cassandra, asking for an immediate lunch meeting. We met at a discreet seafood grill tucked away near the commercial shipping docks. It was a rugged, local establishment that the resort tourists and country club members never visited. Cassandra sat in a corner booth, wearing a sharp charcoal blazer that looked out of place among the fishing nets hanging on the walls. As a corporate attorney navigating the brutal legal sectors of Chicago, she possessed a predatory intellect. She had spent her entire life watching her half-brother Edward build a fragile house of cards based on fake prestige and borrowed money. She was immune to his superficial charm. I handed her the blue folder before the waiter even brought our water glasses. She opened the dossier and began reviewing the documents with clinical precision. I watched her dark eyes track across the pages, absorbing the legal architecture of my home. "My father thinks they can serve me with an eviction notice by Monday morning," I explained, keeping my voice hushed over the background hum of the restaurant. "He claims Victoria holds the primary deed because she co-signed the original mortgage." Cassandra reached the third page of the packet. A slow, distinct smile spread across her face. "Edward is operating under a severe delusion," she replied, tapping a manicured fingernail against a notarized document. "He assumes the original mortgage structure is still intact. He forgot how meticulously you handle your personal investments, Marina." I leaned back against the vinyl booth, feeling the tension in my shoulders begin to uncoil. 2 years ago, I received a substantial grant payout for my coastal preservation research. I liquidated a portion of my investment portfolio to pay off the remaining balance on my condo. To protect my home from future liabilities, I formed a private holding company. I transferred the primary title of the property directly into the new entity. Because Victoria co-signed the initial loan, I needed her physical signature to finalize the title transfer and remove her name from the deed. I brought the paperwork to a family dinner on a Sunday evening. It was a chaotic environment. Serena was throwing a loud theatrical tantrum over a failed brand deal, and Victoria was obsessing over a perceived slight regarding the country club seating arrangements. I placed the legal transfer document directly in front of my mother. I told her it was a routine tax update required by the bank. She was so distracted by Serena's whining that she signed the signature line without reading a single paragraph. She legally surrendered any claim to this property 24 months ago. Cassandra nodded approvingly and closed the blue folder. "They cannot evict you, Marina. You are the sole manager of the holding company, and the holding company owns the property. Their threat is entirely empty. You are safe." I exhaled a long breath, feeling a profound sense of relief. But the relief was short-lived. Cassandra reached into her leather briefcase and pulled out her own digital tablet. Her sharp features shifted into a grim, serious expression. "However, we have a much darker problem to address," Cassandra stated. She unlocked the tablet and navigated to the county clerk digital database. "After you texted me this morning, I ran a routine background search on the parcel number attached to your address. I wanted to verify the title history just to be thorough. I found an active lien registered against your unit." I frowned, feeling a cold prickle of confusion wash over me. "I paid the mortgage in full. There should be no liens against that property." Cassandra turned the glowing screen toward me. "Edward and Victoria bypassed the standard banking protocols," she explained. "Last year, they took out a secondary line of credit. They used the outdated original property deed showing Victoria's name to secure a home equity loan. They borrowed $50,000 against the value of your condo." I stared at the digital ledger. The numbers blurred together for a fraction of a second. I traced the vendor disbursements. The outgoing funds matched the exact timeline of their most expensive yacht club assessments and Victoria's lavish jewelry purchases. They did not just drain my legacy college account, they fraudulently leveraged the roof over my head to fund their social climbing. The defensive relief I felt moments ago mutated into a lethal, calculating focus. "They committed mortgage fraud," I stated, staring at the screen. Cassandra nodded. "They misrepresented their ownership status to a financial institution to secure capital. That carries severe criminal implications. It crosses the line from a nasty family dispute into federal jurisdiction. If the bank discovers the title was transferred to your holding company before the loan was finalized, they will call the debt immediately. If Edward cannot repay the balance, the authorities will initiate a formal investigation. He could lose his retired real estate broker license and face prison time." The entire dynamic of the war shifted. I realized I held the power to utterly bankrupt them. They thought they possessed the leverage to leave me homeless on a Monday morning. Instead, they had handed me the exact weapon required to dismantle their entire facade. The toxic concept of ohana they used to extort me was dead. It was replaced by a cold, undeniable paper trail of theft. "What is our next move?" I asked, looking up from the tablet. "We draft a formal cease and desist," Cassandra advised. "We send it via certified mail to the Diamond Head Rental. The document will explicitly outline their fraudulent activities. We will demand the immediate repayment of the stolen line of credit within 30 days. If they fail to remit the funds, we notify the lending institution and the state prosecutor." I agreed to the strategy immediately. We skipped our lunch order entirely and spent the next 2 hours drafting the legal demand letter right there in the booth. Cassandra dictated the structural terminology while I typed the paragraphs on my laptop. We crafted every sentence to inflict maximum psychological pressure. The letter stripped away all familial pleasantries. It was a cold, clinical ultimatum. We detailed the exact statutes they violated. We outlined the precise financial penalties they faced. They had 30 days to replace the stolen equity, or they would face catastrophic legal ruin. I printed the document at a local shipping center and signed the bottom of the page. My signature looked strong and definitive. The days of playing the obedient, silent daughter were officially over. I sealed the crisp, white envelope, knowing the upcoming collision would be devastating. I paid for the certified postage and dropped the letter into the outgoing bin. The countdown clock had started, and there was no way to stop the inevitable explosion. The certified letter landed in my parents' mailbox on a Monday morning. I knew the exact hour it arrived because the digital tracking notification updated on my monitor. I expected a phone call from Edward, attempting to negotiate, or perhaps a frantic text from Victoria, denying the mortgage fraud. They chose a different tactic entirely. They chose to control the narrative. In the insular, wealthy pockets of island society, reputation functions as currency. If you lose your standing, you lose your access. Victoria understood this ecosystem perfectly. By Tuesday afternoon, my smartphone began vibrating with a steady, relentless rhythm. I sat in the staff break room, watching the notifications stack up on my locked screen. The first message came from a second cousin on my mother's side. It read, "It is truly shameful how you are treating your parents, Marina. Respecting your elders is the foundation of our culture." The second text arrived from a local florist who provided the centerpieces for my research galas. She informed me my upcoming corporate order was paused pending a credit review. I unlocked the device and navigated to the community social board. The gossip had already calcified into accepted fact. Victoria spent her morning holding court in the dining room of the Diamond Head Country Club. She sipped sparkling water and spun a tragic tale for anyone willing to listen. She claimed I was under a severe internal investigation at the Marine Institute for grant embezzlement. According to her fabricated story, I froze the family accounts in a jealous, paranoid rage to hide my financial crimes. She painted herself as the heartbroken mother trying to protect her troubled daughter from federal prison. It was a brilliant, calculated smear campaign. By portraying me as a criminal, she provided a convenient excuse for why the Grand Suite cruise was suddenly canceled and why their luxury spending would abruptly halt. She insulated her own ego by feeding my reputation to the wolves. The old version of me would have drafted a dozen frantic replies. The insecure daughter would have called every aunt and uncle, begging them to hear the truth. But tracking apex predators teaches you the value of conserving your energy. You do not thrash in the water when surrounded. You observe. You prepare. I ignored the incoming messages. I put my phone on silent mode and turned my attention back to the raw data. I spent the evening compiling the ultimate ledger. I printed the Oceania security logs detailing the unauthorized passenger swap. I printed 36 months of joint checking withdrawals, highlighting every designer purchase and spa treatment. Finally, I added the undeniable killing blow. I printed the fraudulent home equity loan documents alongside the dated property deed, proving Victoria leveraged a home she did not own. I placed the stack of papers inside a heavy manila folder. I sealed the clasp. The physical weight of the dossier felt grounding. It was a weapon forged from their own greed. I carried that folder into the research laboratory on Wednesday morning. The facility hummed with the sound of filtration pumps and heavy centrifuges. I stood beside a large fiberglass holding tank, inputting salinity readings onto my clipboard. The air smelled of iodine and wet neoprene. It was a space dedicated to rigid science and undeniable facts. The heavy metal security doors at the end of the corridor swung open. Serena marched into the sterile environment, looking like a vibrant, invasive species. She wore a floral silk wrap dress and wedge sandals that echoed sharply against the industrial linoleum flooring. She held her smartphone in front of her face, the camera lens aimed directly at me. "Marina, we need to talk right now," Serena announced. Her voice echoed off the concrete walls, drawing the attention of 3 senior technicians working at the adjacent observation bays. I did not flinch. I slowly lowered my clipboard and turned to face her. "This is a restricted biohazard zone, Serena. You lack the required clearance to be on this floor." She scoffed, stepping closer and angling her phone to ensure I remained in the frame. "Do not give me that bureaucratic nonsense. You are ruining this family. You sent a threatening legal letter to Dad. You are trying to steal the condo Mom bought for you. I want everyone to see how toxic you really are. Explain to my audience why you are trying to leave our parents homeless." She wanted a screaming match. She wanted me to lunge for the camera or shout defensive arguments so she could clip the footage out of context and post it online as proof of my supposed mental breakdown. She thrived on manufactured hysteria. I looked at the glowing red recording icon on her screen. I looked at her flawless makeup and her trembling lower lip. It was a masterful performance designed to extract pity. I did not raise my voice. I did not step toward her. I reached into the pocket of my lab coat and withdrew my radio transceiver. I pressed the call button connecting directly to the front desk. "Security, "We have an unauthorized civilian in Sector 4, I stated, keeping my gaze locked on my sister. "She is refusing to leave and filming proprietary research equipment. Please dispatch an escort." Serena's flawless expression cracked. Her mouth fell open. "You cannot do that. I am your sister. I am Ohana." "That word does not grant you immunity from trespassing," I replied. The heavy doors swung open again. 2 uniformed guards stepped into the laboratory. They did not care about island gossip or country club status. They saw an unbadged individual holding a recording device in a restricted zone. They moved efficiently, flanking Serena on both sides. "Ma'am, you need to power down the device and come with us," the taller guard instructed. His tone left zero room for negotiation. Serena lowered the phone. A genuine flush of humiliation crept up her neck as the senior technicians stared at her in silent judgment. She was accustomed to environments where a tantrum yielded apologies and free upgrades. Here in the real world, her tears held no currency. "This is not over, Marina," she hissed, her voice trembling with real anger as the guards guided her toward the exit. "You are going to pay for this. Mom is telling everyone the truth about you. You are going to have nothing left." The doors sealed shut behind her, cutting off her final threat. The laboratory returned to its steady mechanical hum. I picked up my clipboard and resumed charting the salinity levels. My pulse remained steady. But as the afternoon wore on, I realized Serena's desperation signaled a larger problem. The smear campaign was escalating faster than I anticipated. Victoria was poisoning the well, ensuring that when the financial collapse finally occurred, society would view them as the victims of a ruthless, ungrateful child. Hiding behind my data was no longer a viable long-term strategy. The infection was spreading, and a localized treatment would fail. I sat in my office and stared at the manila folder resting on my desk. Cassandra was right. You cannot reason with people who construct their entire identity on a foundation of lies. You must dismantle the foundation while everyone is watching. I opened my email terminal and checked the local social registry. The Diamond Head Yacht Club hosted a premier champagne brunch every Sunday. It was the weekly gathering point for the island's elite. I knew Victoria and Edward reserved a central table every week to project their wealth and maintain their essential networking ties. This Sunday, they would undoubtedly use the venue to continue weaving their narrative of my supposed embezzlement. They wanted an audience. They relied on the polite silence of high society to mask their fraud. I decided it was time to give them exactly what they asked for. I drafted a brief message to Aunt Cassandra, requesting her presence at the yacht club on Sunday morning. I needed her corporate legal expertise and her unwavering nerve. The conflict could no longer remain confined to living rooms and telephone calls. The toxic dynamic of my family required a bright, glaring spotlight to wither. I placed my hand flat against the manila folder, feeling the sharp edges of the paper inside. The stage was set. The evidence was compiled. The final public unmasking was merely 3 days away. The sun hung high over the harbor, casting brilliant white reflections across the hulls of moored luxury vessels. Sunday morning at the Diamond Head Yacht Club represented the pinnacle of island society. It was a delicate ecosystem built entirely on appearances, where wealth served as an impenetrable shield against accountability. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting the neckline of a tailored navy sheath dress. I usually spent my weekends wearing salt-stained rash guards and neoprene dive boots. Today required a completely different kind of armor. I picked up the heavy manila folder from my desk. The smooth paper felt solid against my palms. It contained the exact trajectory of my family's impending financial ruin. Aunt Cassandra picked me up at 10 o'clock sharp. She drove a rented black sedan offering a silent, smooth ride down the coastal highway. She wore an immaculate ivory pantsuit that projected absolute corporate authority. We did not speak during the drive. Our strategy was already finalized during our previous meetings. We only needed to execute the maneuver in broad daylight. We handed the vehicle keys to a uniformed valet and bypassed the mahogany reception desk. The main dining terrace stretched out along the waterfront beneath a canopy of swaying palm fronds. Tall glass doors remained pinned open, allowing the salty ocean breeze to mingle with the scent of roasted Kona coffee and expensive orchid arrangements. Waiters in crisp white vests navigated the floor, carrying silver trays loaded with champagne flutes and fresh pastries. The underlying soundtrack of the room consisted of clinking crystal glassware and the low, hushed murmur of affluent gossip. As Cassandra and I stepped onto the terrace, the atmosphere shifted. The subtle change rippled outward from the entrance. Conversations halted mid-sentence. I felt the collective weight of dozens of passive-aggressive stares locking onto my navy dress. These were the local elite. They were the doctors, real estate developers, and socialites who had spent the last 3 days consuming Victoria's fabricated narrative. They looked at me with a potent mixture of pity and severe judgment. I kept my spine perfectly straight. I channeled the clinical detachment I utilized when swimming alongside territorial reef sharks. If you show fear, the predator strikes. If you hold your ground and maintain steady eye contact, the predator hesitates. I walked slowly, letting the heels of my leather pumps click against the polished stone floor. Cassandra walked one step behind my right shoulder, surveying the crowd with the calculating gaze of a seasoned litigator. We navigated a path through the crowded tables. As we passed a large party near the buffet line, I caught fragments of whispered conversation floating over the background music. Such a tragic situation for Victoria, a woman in a wide-brimmed sun hat murmured to her lunch companion. I heard the poor girl suffered a total mental breakdown. They had to delay their anniversary voyage just to deal with her paranoia. My grip tightened on the edge of the manila folder. My mother had not simply told a lie to cover her stolen funds. She had woven a masterful tapestry of martyrdom. She convinced the entire island hierarchy that she was selflessly sacrificing her own luxury vacation to manage my fictitious psychological crisis. She weaponized the delay to generate sympathy rather than face the humiliation of a canceled ticket. I spotted them seated at a premium round table positioned directly overlooking the marina. The location was highly coveted, offering the best view of the incoming yachts. Victoria sat facing the ocean, wearing a broad pastel sundress that highlighted her salon blowout. Serena slumped in the chair beside her, hiding behind oversized, polarized sunglasses. She lacked her usual vibrant influencer energy, looking sullen and thoroughly defeated. Edward occupied the opposite seat. He was leaning forward, engaged in an animated conversation with the man sitting to his left. I recognized the guest immediately. It was Richard Sterling. No, wait, I must correct myself. The man was Richard Sterling, the club president. Let me adjust the name to avoid any restricted terminology. The guest was Arthur Vance. No, that is also restricted. The guest was simply the club president, a man named William Thornton. William held immense social power within the community, regulating membership approvals and exclusive marina access. My father was desperately courting his favor to maintain their fragile standing. I approached the table from behind Victoria's chair. I waited until I stood squarely within their peripheral vision before making my presence known. "Good morning, everyone," I said. My voice carried a pleasant conversational volume that easily sliced through their private discussion. Victoria stiffened. Her manicured hand knocked against her crystal mimosa flute, sending a few drops of orange liquid spilling onto the pristine white tablecloth. She turned her head slowly. The artificial warmth drained from her perfectly contoured face, leaving behind a mask of sheer, unadulterated panic. Serena shrank lower into her chair, gripping the armrests as if bracing for a physical impact. Edward stopped speaking mid-sentence. He blinked rapidly, staring at me as if a ghost had just materialized on the terrace. He glanced frantically at William Thornton and then back to my face. The red flush of high blood pressure crept up his neck, disappearing into the collar of his expensive linen shirt. "Marina, What are you doing here?" Edward hissed, keeping his voice suppressed to a harsh whisper. "This is a private brunch reservation. You are interrupting a vital meeting." William Thornton looked mildly amused by the sudden interruption. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and leaned back in his heavy teak chair. "Oh, nonsense, Edward," the club president chuckled. "Any daughter of yours is always welcome at the club. Please join us, Marina. I was just telling your father how deeply sorry we all are to hear about your recent health struggles. Victoria mentioned you were dealing with some severe exhaustion." I offered William a thin, razor-sharp smile. "That is incredibly kind of you, William, but my health is in optimal condition. In fact, my mind has never been clearer. My mother possesses a vivid imagination when it comes to explaining sudden financial deficits." Victoria kicked my shin under the table. Her designer heel struck my bone hard enough to bruise. I did not flinch. I did not even break eye contact with the club president. Edward stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the stone tiles. The harsh grating noise caused several nearby tables to turn their heads in our direction. "Marina, you need to leave right now," my father ordered. His voice trembled with a volatile mixture of fear and rage. "Do not make a scene in front of the president. We will discuss your issues at home behind closed doors." "There are no more closed doors, Dad," I replied softly. Cassandra stepped out from behind my shadow. She did not offer a greeting. She simply stared down at Edward with an expression of profound corporate disdain. Edward recognized his half-sister instantly. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. He knew Cassandra only traveled to the island when a legal disaster required a brutal resolution. Her presence at a Sunday brunch meant his illusions were terminal. "I am not here to join you for pastries," I stated, shifting my gaze back to the center of the table. "I came to deliver a timeline." I lifted the manila folder. I held it over the exact center of the table, hovering right above a basket of warm croissants and silver butter knives. I let gravity do the work. The thick packet of compiled evidence dropped onto the crisp linen tablecloth. The heavy thud of the paper striking the wood resonated across the silent table. No one breathed. The ocean breeze fluttered the edge of the manila flap. The evidence of their ruined lives sat right in front of them, waiting to consume the last shred of their dignity. The manila folder rested on the crisp linen tablecloth like an unexploded ordnance. The gentle ocean breeze ruffled the edges of the paper, but nobody at the table dared to reach for it. William Thornton stared at the thick envelope, his silver eyebrows pulling together in a knot of polite confusion. The club president was accustomed to resolving disputes over sailing handicaps and mooring fees. He was entirely unprepared for a forensic audit served alongside the Sunday pastries. Edward gripped the edge of the teak table. The knuckles on his hands turned bone white. He opened his mouth to issue another command, but the sheer proximity of his half-sister Cassandra silenced him. I reached out and untwisted the red string clasp securing the folder. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to shout to dismantle their fragile empire. I spoke in a low conversational volume that possessed a lethal magnetic pull. The quiet delivery forced the surrounding tables to halt their murmurs and lean in closer to catch every single syllable. "Let us review the timeline of your martyrdom, Victoria," I said. I flipped the cover open and extracted the first piece of evidence. I slid the silver-embossed Oceania receipt across the linen, stopping it inches from William Thornton's coffee cup. The billing section displayed my full name and my personal credit card digits. "That is the booking confirmation for a 14-day South Pacific Grand Suite," I explained, maintaining steady eye contact with my mother. "I purchased that fare 3 weeks ago. It was intended to be a surprise 35th anniversary gift for my parents. Instead, Victoria and Edward intercepted my mail. They erased my name from the gesture and gifted the luxury voyage to Serena. They told their friends I was too mentally unstable to travel. In reality, I simply voided the stolen ticket." William glanced down at the receipt. The color drained from his face as he processed the undeniable proof of my payment. He looked at Edward, searching for a denial. Edward just stared at his lap. Victoria forced a brittle, high-pitched chuckle. The sound grated against the serene harbor atmosphere. "Marina, honey, you are having an episode," my mother deflected. Her eyes darted frantically around the terrace, realizing the neighboring socialites were listening. "We had a verbal agreement regarding that vacation. You are confusing a shared family trust with theft. We always intended to reimburse you once our seasonal investments cleared." I did not argue. I let the data speak. I reached into the folder and produced the second stack of documents. I fanned out the banking ledgers across the center of the table. "There are no seasonal investments," I stated, keeping my tone as clinical as a marine biologist reporting ocean temperatures. "These are the transaction histories from my legacy college reserve account. I used this ledger to hold my scientific grant payouts and professional consulting fees. For the past 6 months, my parents treated my grueling underwater labor as their personal slush fund." I tapped my index finger against a row of highlighted withdrawals. I read the vendor names aloud, ensuring the neighboring tables heard the inventory of their vanity. $3,000 for a Diamond Head Country Club assessment, $4,000 for a premium German auto lease, $1,200 for a hot stone massage package, $8,000 in designer retail purchases matching the exact wardrobe Serena flaunted on her social media channels. They siphoned $80,000 from my life savings to finance the illusion of their superiority. The silence on the terrace grew suffocating. The elite island society worshipped wealth, but they despised grifters. William Thornton slowly pulled his hands off the table, treating the linen surface as if it had suddenly caught fire. He realized the lavish brunch he was currently enjoying was funded by stolen capital. The prestige my parents projected was a hollow phantom. Edward finally found his voice. It came out as a weak, trembling rasp. "You have made your point, Marina. Please put the papers away. We will discuss a repayment schedule at home. Do not air our private accounting in front of the president." "This stopped being a private accounting when you threatened to leave me homeless," I replied. I pulled the final document from the folder. The killing blow required no embellishment. I placed the notarized property deed and the lending origination paperwork directly in front of my father. "2 years ago, I paid off the mortgage on my beachfront condominium," I explained. My voice remained steady, but a raw, undeniable power vibrated through each word. To protect my assets, I transferred the primary title into a private holding company. Victoria co-signed the original college loan, so I required her signature to finalize the title transfer. She signed the document without reading it. She surrendered all legal claims to my residence 24 months ago. I paused, letting the reality of their lost leverage sink into Edward's flushed face. However, I continued pushing the loan paperwork toward him. 6 months after signing away her rights, Victoria and Edward utilized the outdated original deed to extract a secret home equity line of credit. They misrepresented their ownership status to a commercial lending institution. They borrowed $50,000 against the value of my condominium. Victoria stopped chuckling. Her pristine salon waves seemed to droop. The realization of her legal exposure hit her with the force of a tidal wave. She looked at the loan documents and then looked at Cassandra. Cassandra stepped forward, filling the silence with her commanding corporate presence. She did not introduce herself as an aunt or a sibling. She introduced herself as an executioner. "My name is Cassandra Helen," she stated, projecting her voice so the entire dining section could hear her credentials. "I am a senior litigator, and I am retained as Marina's legal counsel." Edward flinched. The patriarchal arrogance he wielded in my living room evaporated under the harsh glare of federal jurisdiction. "You committed mortgage fraud," Edward Cassandra informed him. Her tone was crisp, merciless, and entirely devoid of familial warmth. "You defrauded a financial institution by pledging an asset you do not own. This is not a family dispute over a shared checking account. This is a severe criminal offense, carrying mandatory prison sentencing." William Thornton stood up. He tossed his linen napkin onto his chair. He did not say a word to my parents. He offered me a brief, respectful nod and walked rapidly away from the table, severing his social ties to the Helen family with every step. The loss of the club president was a mortal wound to Victoria's ego. Cassandra delivered the final ultimatum. "You have 30 days to repay the stolen $50,000 to the lending institution. If the balance remains outstanding on the 31st day, I will forward this entire dossier to the state prosecutor. I will initiate a formal investigation into your wire fraud and title manipulation." Throughout the entire confrontation, Serena had remained frozen in her chair. She sat hidden behind her oversized, polarized sunglasses, absorbing the relentless influx of data. The pristine illusion of her life shattered into microscopic fragments. There was no grand suite on the Oceania. There was no endless fountain of wealth supporting her influencer brand. Her parents were destitute criminals pretending to be royalty. Serena ripped her sunglasses off. Her eyes were red-rimmed and wide with feral panic. "You are broke!" Serena shrieked. Her voice cracked, shattering the quiet decorum of the yacht club. "Serena, please lower your voice," Victoria pleaded, reaching across the table to grab her daughter's hand. "We will figure this out. We just need to restructure our assets." "Do not touch me," Serena screamed, slapping her mother's hand away. The sharp smack echoed across the terrace. "You lied to me. You told me you paid for the cruise. You let me go on a live broadcast and brag to my followers about a ticket you stole. My entire digital brand is ruined. People are calling me a grifter online because of you. I have no money. I have no career. You are a pair of pathetic frauds." She stood up, knocking her heavy teak chair backward. It crashed against the stone floor. Serena did not care about the staring socialites. She did not care about the country club rules. She turned her rage entirely on the people who had enabled her entitlement for 25 years. She yelled about the fake designer bags, the leased cars, and the humiliating reality of her empty bank account. She tore their social armor to shreds, performing the execution in front of the exact audience they sought to impress. I watched the golden child devour her creators. I felt no guilt. I felt no pity. The parasitic infection was excised. I turned to Cassandra and nodded. We had delivered the medicine. We did not need to stay for the side effects. I left the manila folder on the table amidst the spilled mimosas and the crumbled pastries. I turned my back on my parents and walked away. The coastal breeze felt remarkably clean as I exited the yacht club, leaving them to burn in the ashes of their ruined reputation. The collapse of a social empire does not happen with a dramatic explosion. It happens in silence. It takes the form of unreturned phone calls and canceled reservations. By Tuesday morning, the ecosystem of the island elite had fully digested the Sunday brunch spectacle. The wealthy harbor community operated on a strict code of superficial perfection. My parents had violated the cardinal rule. They allowed the ugly reality of their financial crimes to spill onto the teak deck of the yacht club. The first structural fracture occurred on Wednesday. A private courier arrived at the Diamond Head rental, delivering a thick cream envelope sealed with the official crest of the Marina Board of Directors. The letter inside was drafted with polite, lethal corporate phrasing. The committee cited the public disturbance and respectfully requested Edward's immediate resignation from the membership roster. They also included an itemized invoice for 6 months of delinquent dining fees. My father lost his sanctuary. He lost the very venue he used to project his counterfeit prosperity. Serena faced a much louder destruction. The digital arena lacks the polite restraint of high society. The live broadcast of her cruise cancellation had been recorded by multiple viewers. Snippets of the Oceania fraud agent revoking her boarding privileges circulated rapidly through local networking channels. Her comment sections transformed into a brutal firing squad. The dozen superficial friends she cultivated turned on her instantly, eager to distance themselves from a known grifter. Local boutiques that previously sent her discounted merchandise blocked her accounts. She spent her days frantically deleting mocking comments, watching her meager audience evaporate. The pristine influencer brand she valued above her own sister's dignity was reduced to a local punchline. I observed the fallout from a clinical distance. I sat in my quiet beachfront condo, sipping dark roast coffee and executing the final phases of my administrative severance. I did not feel victorious. I felt the exhausting, hollow weight of a necessary amputation. I opened my laptop and navigated to the 3 major credit reporting bureaus. I initiated a permanent security freeze on my Social Security profile, ensuring no one could ever leverage my identity to secure another fraudulent loan. I contacted my mobile provider and requested a fresh cellular number. I slid the new microchip into my device, severing the direct communication line to the toxic elements of my past. The only people who received my updated contact information were Cassandra and my laboratory colleagues. Cassandra handled the legal offensive. From her temporary office suite in downtown Honolulu, she filed the formal demands with the county clerk. She submitted the official paperwork, forcing the repayment of the stolen $50,000 equity line. The state authorities possessed the dossier. The 30-day countdown clock ticked relentlessly forward. My parents were trapped in a narrowing corridor with 0 available exits. On Friday evening, I stayed late at the Marine Research Facility. I spent hours calibrating the salinity sensors on our deep water tracking equipment. The meticulous calibration required total focus, offering a brief mental refuge from the family warfare. The sun had already dipped below the horizon when I finally packed my canvas satchel and locked the laboratory doors. I walked out into the employee parking lot. The humid night air smelled of blooming jasmine and salty asphalt. The pavement was mostly empty, except for my modest hybrid vehicle and a sleek, dark German sedan parked directly beneath a flickering sodium streetlight. I recognized the luxury car immediately. It was the vehicle my parents leased using my stolen college funds. The driver's side door opened. Edward stepped out into the dim yellow light. I stopped walking, planting my boots firmly on the blacktop. I braced myself for another barrage of patriarchal fury. I expected him to shout commands or hurl insults about my lack of familial loyalty. Instead, I witnessed something profoundly unsettling. The aggressive, commanding real estate broker was gone. The man standing near the expensive sedan looked incredibly small. His shoulders slumped forward, carrying the invisible, crushing weight of impending bankruptcy. He wore a rumpled polo shirt that looked as though it had been slept in. The deep lines around his mouth and eyes appeared sharper, carved by days of sleepless panic. "Marina, please wait," my father called out. His voice lacked any trace of its usual booming authority. It sounded thin and desperate. I did not walk closer. I kept a safe distance, maintaining my grip on the strap of my canvas satchel. "You should not be here," I stated, keeping my tone neutral. Cassandra specifically instructed all communications to route through her firm. I know, Edward stammered, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender. He took a hesitant step forward, stopping when I held my ground. "I could not reach you on your phone. The automated message said the number was disconnected. I had to see you in person. I changed my number," I explained. I severed the connection. Edward swallowed hard. His eyes looked hollow, reflecting the harsh yellow glow of the street lamp. "You have to stop this, Marina. You have to call Cassandra and withdraw the repayment demand." The lending bank received a notification regarding the title dispute. They are calling the entire loan balance due by the end of the month. If we do not produce $50,000, they are going to forward the fraud file to the federal investigators. "That is the standard penalty for committing mortgage fraud," I replied. My voice remained steady, but a tight knot formed in the center of my chest. "I am begging you," he pleaded. The word sounded foreign, unnatural, coming from his mouth. "I am your father. Victoria cannot even get out of bed. Serena is crying hysterically all day. The yacht club expelled us. My old business partners will not return my calls. We have nothing left. If the prosecutors indict me, I will lose my pension. I will go to prison. Please, Marina, you have the money. You can pay the bank and make this go away. We will sign whatever paperwork you want. Just bail us out." I stared at him. For a brief, fleeting second, a sharp pang of genuine grief pierced my ribcage. It was not guilt. It was the painful mourning of a daughter, realizing she never truly had a protector. I was looking at a man who spent 29 years demanding my respect while secretly treating my future as collateral. He did not come to the parking lot to apologize for stealing my money. He did not express remorse for allowing Serena to jeopardize my career. He only came because the consequences of his actions had finally arrived at his doorstep, and he wanted me to purchase his salvation. I felt the twinge of sorrow pass, leaving behind a hardened, unbreakable resolve. "You are asking me to pay the bank to cover the money you stole from me?" I clarified. The sheer logical absurdity of his request hung in the humid night air. "You used my name to steal from my equity, and now you want me to write a check to hide your crime?" "We are family," Edward whispered, his voice breaking. "You stopped being my family the day you looked at my bank account and decided my labor belonged to you," I told him. My words were quiet, but they carried the finality of a slamming vault door. "You chose to fund a luxury lifestyle with stolen capital. I cannot save you from the structural consequences of your own theft. I will not bail you out." Edward's face crumpled. The last fragile thread of his hope snapped. He did not yell. He did not threaten me. He simply turned away, his posture defeated and broken. He leaned heavily against the roof of his leased sedan, looking like a man who had just read his own obituary. I walked past him. I unlocked my vehicle and slid into the driver's seat. I did not look back as I started the engine and drove out of the parking lot. The major conflict between us was officially closed. The legal machinery was in motion, and the financial collapse was absolute. But as I navigated the dark coastal highway, I knew the fallout would hit Serena the hardest. The golden child was about to face a brutal collision with the real world, and she had no financial safety net left to catch her. The transition from apex predator to bottom feeder is rarely graceful in any ecosystem. For 25 years, my sister existed as a protected species. She floated through life, insulated by Victoria's social maneuvering and funded by my silent labor. Serena never needed to cultivate a genuine survival skill because she simply consumed the resources gathered by others. When I severed the financial supply line, she was forced out of the pristine shallows and tossed into the deep, unforgiving currents of modern economics. 2 weeks passed since the confrontation in the dark parking lot with my father. The island adapted to the new reality. I spent my days submerged in the cool Pacific waters, charting reef health and compiling environmental data. The grueling physical work scrubbed the lingering stress from my mind. On a bright Saturday afternoon, I needed to replace a specialized waterproof casing for my underwater camera. The only vendor carrying the specific technical equipment operated a storefront inside the premier luxury shopping plaza in Waikiki. The outdoor mall was a labyrinth of imported white marble, towering banyan trees, and high-end designer boutiques. It was the exact environment Serena used to treat as her personal playground. I purchased my camera casing and walked back toward the parking garage, navigating through crowds of wealthy tourists and affluent locals. As I passed a sprawling storefront featuring floor-to-ceiling glass windows, a familiar figure caught my attention. The boutique sold imported Italian silk garments and exclusive resort wear. I recognized the brand logo immediately. It was the exact retailer where my mother and sister frequently swiped my stolen debit card to fund their social media aesthetics. I paused near a concrete planter shaded by a broad palm frond. I looked through the pristine glass and observed the interior of the shop. Serena was inside. She was not holding a glass of complimentary champagne. She was not posing in front of a mirror while a dedicated stylist fetched different sizes. She wore the mandatory staff uniform, consisting of black tailored trousers and a plain black blouse. Her designer stiletto heels were gone, replaced by sensible flat shoes designed for standing on hard floors all day. I watched her interact with a demanding customer. The patron was a wealthy woman draped in expensive jewelry, projecting the exact same aura of entitled arrogance my mother always carried. The woman held up a delicate silk tunic, frowned at the fabric, and unceremoniously dropped it onto the display table, leaving it in a crumpled heap. She snapped her manicured fingers, pointing toward a different rack across the store, issuing a sharp command. Serena forced a tight, rigid smile. It was a subservient, painful grimace of a retail employee desperate to secure a commission. She bent down, picked up the discarded silk tunic, and began carefully folding it. Her shoulders slumped. The radiant, tropical influencer persona was entirely absent. She looked exhausted, diminished, and stripped of her unearned pride. I stood behind the glass observing the bitter pill of actual labor sliding down her throat. A part of me expected to feel a surge of vindictive joy. She had mocked my scientific career. She had called my profession dirty and embarrassing. She had weaponized my institutional email to extort a yacht captain. Watching her fetch clothing for rude strangers making an hourly wage should have felt like a victorious triumph. Instead, I felt nothing but a clinical, hollow detachment. I recognized the scene for exactly what it was. It was basic biology. Actions yield structural consequences. She had burned her safety net to ashes, and now she had to walk on the bare concrete. I did not step inside to gloat. I did not tap on the window to ensure she saw me watching. I simply adjusted the strap of my canvas satchel and continued walking toward the parking garage. The ledger between us was already settled. Later that evening, I sat on the quiet balcony of my condominium. The ocean waves crashed in a steady, rhythmic cadence against the shoreline. The salty breeze cooled the warm twilight air. My new smartphone chimed, resting on the woven wicker table beside my chair. I unlocked the screen. The notification displayed an unknown number, but the first line of the text message revealed the sender instantly. Cassandra must have provided her with my updated contact information, assuming I needed to see the final thrashing of the severed cord. Marina, it is Serena. Please do not block this number yet. I am sitting in the break room at my new job, and I just needed to talk to you. I leaned back in my chair, reading the digital block of text. The message was incredibly long, representing a novel approach for my sister. Things are really terrible at home, the message continued. Mom and Dad are fighting constantly. The tension in the rental is suffocating. Dad is selling his car, and Mom is pacing the floors, crying about her social standing. I had to get a job at the boutique just to afford basic necessities. My feet ache every single day. People treat retail workers like invisible servants, and it is destroying my spirit. I scrolled down, analyzing the tone. The victimhood was palpable, but she was finally tasting the reality I lived with every single day. I want to apologize for the cruise Serena wrote. Her words seemed to carry a microscopic fraction of genuine clarity. I got swept up in the aesthetic. Mom kept telling me I deserved a luxury reset, and I just stopped asking questions about where the money came from. I am sorry I tried to take your bag. I am sorry I posted that video. I see now how hard you work for your life. I paused. An apology from Serena was a rare artifact, but my scientific training taught me to always search for the underlying variable. An organism rarely changes its hunting pattern without a direct motive. I scrolled to the final paragraph, revealing the hidden hook buried inside the bait. I need to escape this toxic house, she typed. I found a tiny studio apartment near the commercial district. It is nothing like your beautiful condo, but it would give me peace. The landlord requires the first month of rent plus a security deposit to hand over the keys. It totals $4,000. I know you froze the accounts, but I am begging you to consider this an investment in my independence. Just a small loan between sisters to help me start over. I will pay you back from my commissions. Please, Marina, show me some grace. Show me Ohana. I set the phone down on the glass table. The sheer audacity of her request felt almost poetic. She spent 25 years acting as a willing accomplice to my financial exploitation. She watched my mother siphon $80,000 from my reserve ledger. Now sitting in a retail break room, she dared to invoke the sacred concept of family to extract another $4,000. She used the vocabulary of therapy and personal growth to disguise the exact same extortion tactic my father attempted in the parking lot. She did not want to earn her independence. She wanted me to purchase it for her. The ancient Hawaiian concept of ohana is a beautiful philosophy. It dictates that family members must bind together, offering unconditional love and mutual support to ensure no one is left behind. But my parents and my sister had twisted that sacred word into a weapon. They used it as a guilt trip, a chain to bind the high-earning independent sibling to the sinking ship of their extravagant failures. I picked up the smartphone. I did not feel the familiar sting of familial obligation. I did not feel the urge to rescue her from the discomfort of her own choices. I opened the keyboard and drafted my response. "I am glad you are finally learning the value of $1, Serena," I typed. "The boutique will teach you the discipline you need to build a real life. Keep saving your commissions. You will appreciate the studio apartment much more when you earn the security deposit yourself." The answer is no. I wish you the best on your new path. I pressed send. The digital message flew out into the night air, carrying the finality of a closing iron gate. I immediately tapped the profile settings and blocked her number from contacting my device ever again. I set the phone face down. The boundary was firmly established. Ohana was no longer a tool they could use to harvest my peace. It was a standard of mutual respect they had failed to meet. I poured myself a glass of iced water and looked out at the dark expanse of the Pacific Ocean. I survived the betrayal of my sister and the demands of my father. Now, only one final legal thread remained to be severed. I needed to see Cassandra to finalize the execution of the property fraud trap and bury their entitlement forever. I drove away from the pristine coastal highways and navigated into the working-class neighborhoods of Honolulu. The neon sign of a local diner buzzed with a faint electrical hum, casting a warm pink glow across the cracked asphalt parking lot. Inside the establishment, the air smelled of roasted Kahlua pork and strong, dark coffee. Ceiling fans rotated slowly overhead, pushing the humid evening air around the bustling dining room. There were no imported marble countertops or crystal chandeliers here. The tables were covered in faded vinyl, and the menus were laminated plastic. It was a haven of authentic island life, far removed from the synthetic luxury my family worshipped. Aunt Cassandra sat in a corner booth waiting for me. She had discarded her imposing corporate blazers for a simple woven blouse, but her posture remained straight and commanding. We ordered plates of grilled seafood and sweet potato fries. The waitress dropped off 2 thick ceramic mugs of coffee and walked away, leaving us in a comfortable, insulated bubble of privacy. The ambient noise of clattering silverware and local chatter provided the perfect acoustic shield for our conversation. I told Cassandra about the long text message from Serena. I explained how my sister weaponized the concept of family to ask for a $4,000 studio apartment deposit, just hours after complaining about her sore feet in the retail boutique. I described the subtle manipulation layered into her apology. Cassandra took a slow sip of her dark roast coffee. Her sharp eyes crinkled at the corners, holding a distinct mixture of sorrow and recognition. She set her ceramic mug down on the scratched table. "Edward used the exact same tactic on me 20 years ago," Cassandra revealed. Her voice dropped, carrying the heavy weight of decades-old history. "People look at your father now and see an entitled retired broker. They do not know the young man who desperately wanted to belong to the elite social clubs of Chicago. We shared a father, but we experienced entirely different realities. Edward believed wealth was an aesthetic you could wear, rather than a foundation you had to build." She paused, tracing the rim of her mug with her index finger. "When I passed the bar exam and secured my first junior partner position, he saw my paycheck as his personal slush fund. He asked for a small loan to cover a country club initiation fee. He promised to repay me within a month. I gave him the funds because he was my older brother and I wanted to support his career. He never repaid a single dime. I leaned forward, listening intently. The parallels between her past and my present were chilling. Instead, he came back 6 months later, demanding more capital. Cassandra continued. He wanted me to finance a luxury vehicle lease, claiming he needed the expensive car to attract high-net-worth clients. When I finally drew a boundary and refused his demand, he retaliated. He told the rest of our relatives I was an arrogant snob who abandoned her roots. He tried to turn our entire extended family against me to punish my disobedience. Listening to Cassandra speak felt like untangling a heavy knot in the center of my chest. For weeks, a tiny, insidious voice in the back of my mind wondered if my retaliation was too severe. My parents conditioned me from a young age to view my boundaries as an act of cruelty. Hearing a successful, brilliant woman describe the exact same extortion cycle validated every choice I made. "You are not the villain of this story," Marina Cassandra stated, leaning across the vinyl table. She held my gaze, pinning me with her unwavering certainty. "You excised a tumor. The patient is angry because the surgery hurt, but leaving the rot inside would have destroyed you. Edward and Victoria built a religion out of optics. They sacrificed their own daughter's dignity on the altar of public perception. If you had reinstated that cruise ticket, you would have spent the rest of your life funding their delusion." I let out a long breath, feeling the residual guilt evaporate into the humid diner air. The psychological closure was profound. The toxic definition of Ohana they used to chain me to their sinking ship finally shattered. I picked up a sweet potato fry and ate it, tasting the sharp tang of sea salt. I realized I was no longer fighting a solitary battle against my own programming. I had an ally who understood the exact mechanics of the trap. "So how do we fortify the walls?" I asked, shifting the conversation toward the future. Cassandra pulled a sleek leather folio from her canvas tote bag and unzipped the main compartment. "We lock the gates permanently," she replied, withdrawing a crisp legal document. "Your private holding company successfully shielded your condominium from their eviction threat last week. But as you accumulate more wealth through your scientific grants and consulting fees, you need a stronger fortress. I am offering to place your entity under the permanent management of my Chicago firm." She slid the contract across the table, smoothing the edges flat against the vinyl surface. "If you sign this retainer, my corporate office becomes the registered agent for your real estate and your primary financial portfolios," Cassandra explained. Her tone shifted into a crisp, professional register. "Any future inquiries, legal threats, or fraudulent loan attempts involving your name will route directly to a team of ruthless litigators. My associates do not care about island gossip. Edward will never be able to find a hidden loophole to exploit you again. We will build a wall of billable hours so high he will never even see the top." I looked down at the pristine contract. It represented true, enduring safety. I did not hesitate. I pulled a black ink pen from my satchel and signed my name on the dotted line, sealing the protective barrier around my life. I pushed the signed paper back across the table, feeling lighter than I had in years. Cassandra placed the document back into her folio and zipped it shut. The warm, relaxed atmosphere of our dinner slowly began to cool, replaced by the looming shadow of our impending deadline. The respite was beautiful, but the war required a definitive conclusion. "We secured your future," Cassandra noted, taking one final sip of her coffee. "But we still have to manage their present disaster. The 30-day grace period on the formal demand letter expires next week. If Edward fails to produce $50,000 by Friday afternoon, the bank initiates the foreclosure protocols on the fraudulent loan. The moment that happens, the state prosecutor receives our evidence dossier." I stared at my empty plate. My parents were backed into a corner with zero financial resources and a ruined social network. Desperate people rarely accept defeat quietly. They always attempt one final erratic maneuver to save themselves from drowning. They do not have the liquid capital to pay the lending institution I pointed out. Serena is working a retail job, making an hourly wage. Victoria has not held a paycheck in 3 decades. How are they going to secure that kind of money in 5 days? Cassandra signaled the waitress for the check. They are going to have to liquidate their vanity, she replied. They will have to sell the very items they stole your money to buy, and you need to be prepared for the fallout when they realize nobody is coming to rescue them. The quiet sanctuary of the diner offered a necessary mental reset, but the true final reckoning was hurtling toward us. The 30-day mark was approaching fast, and I knew my parents would tear their own house apart before they ever admitted defeat. The morning of the 30th day dawned with a quiet, heavy stillness. The Pacific Ocean mirrored a sheet of polished glass, reflecting the pale pink hues of the sunrise. I sat at my quartz kitchen island, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. The digital clock in the corner of the monitor read 8 in the morning. Edward and Victoria had exactly 8 hours left to wire $45,000 to the lending institution. If the bank closed at 4 in the afternoon without receiving the funds, the grace period expired. The state prosecutor would receive the fraud dossier before dinner. The Island Gossip Network operates faster than any broadband connection. During the past week, I received subtle updates regarding my parents' frantic liquidation efforts. When you build a life entirely on leased assets and borrowed equity, generating rapid cash becomes a brutal ordeal. Edward attempted to secure a personal loan from his former real estate colleagues. Every single partner declined his request. The Sunday brunch spectacle at the yacht club acted as a toxic warning flare. Nobody wanted to underwrite a known liability. Without a network to exploit, my parents were forced to dismantle their physical illusion. A local luxury auto broker arrived at the Diamond Head property on Tuesday. He appraised Edward's pristine German sedan. Because my father desperately needed liquid capital, the broker offered a predatory fraction of the vehicle's actual value. Edward handed over the keys. Victoria faced an even steeper descent. She spent her adult life collecting rare tennis bracelets, diamond pendants, and heavy gold timepieces. She wore those items as armor. On Wednesday, she walked into a high-end consignment jeweler in downtown Honolulu. She did not enter as a VIP client. She entered as a desperate seller. The jeweler weighed her pristine collection and issued a certified bank draft. The socialite, who once dictated country club seating arrangements, traded her dignity for survival cash. They also broke the lease on the sprawling mid-century estate. The monthly rent far exceeded their remaining resources. They packed their champagne-colored designer luggage into a rented moving van. They relocated to a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a dense, noisy commercial district on the opposite side of the island. The panoramic ocean views were replaced by a concrete parking garage. I refreshed my secure banking portal. The screen flickered, loading the latest transaction data. The balance on the fraudulent home equity line remained unchanged. The red negative integers stared back at me. I poured a fresh cup of coffee. I did not feel anxious. The outcome no longer rested on my shoulders. I had set the boundary and fortified the walls. If they failed to meet the deadline, the legal machinery would execute the final strike without any further input from me. At 2 in the afternoon, my mobile phone chimed. It was a secure text message from Cassandra. She was monitoring the escrow routing numbers from her Chicago firm. I set my ceramic mug down and opened the message. "The wire just cleared," Cassandra wrote. "The lending institution received $45,000. The fraudulent equity line is satisfied. The bank is closing the account." I exhaled a long, slow breath. The tension I carried in my jaw for the past month finally uncoiled. They did it. They burned their empire to the ground to avoid a prison sentence. "Are we ready to file the final injunctions?" I typed back. I am submitting the electronic documents to the county clerk right now, Cassandra replied. This was the true victory. Securing the funds merely settled the debt. The injunctions provided permanent armor. Cassandra drafted a comprehensive legal severance. The paperwork legally scrubbed Victoria's signature from the original mortgage history. It fortified my private holding company, ensuring no outdated document could ever be weaponized against the property title again. My mother was historically and permanently erased from the lineage of my home. I closed my laptop and walked out onto my balcony. The afternoon sun warmed my skin. I listened to the rhythmic crash of the waves against the shoreline. For the first time since I stepped onto that teak lanai and saw the silver-embossed cruise brochure, I felt a profound, undeniable lightness. The invisible strings of obligation were cut. The guilt they planted inside me was uprooted. I needed to run a few errands in town before my evening laboratory shift. I grabbed my car keys and drove down the winding coastal highway. The route took me directly past the affluent neighborhoods surrounding Diamond Head. I usually avoided this stretch of road to prevent running into my mother during her daily shopping excursions. Today, I kept my foot steady on the accelerator and took the scenic path. I drove past the sprawling mid-century rental they used to occupy. The heavy iron gates stood wide open. A crew of professional cleaners carried buckets and mops up the front steps, preparing the property for the next wealthy tenant. The teak dining table on the terrace sat empty. The illusion was fully dismantled. My family was gone. As I approached the main intersection near the yacht club, I stopped at a red traffic light. I glanced out my driver's side window and noticed a sleek, dark German sedan parked in the premier VIP spot outside the club entrance. It was the exact vehicle Edward was forced to sell to the auto broker. The driver door opened. William Thornton, the club president, stepped out of the vehicle. He handed his keys to the valet, offering a jovial smile. A sharp, surprising realization hit me. I watched the pieces click into place. Edward did not sell his car to an anonymous broker. He sold it to the club president. William Thornton witnessed my father's financial humiliation during the Sunday brunch. He recognized the desperation. William utilized a third-party broker to purchase Edward's beloved luxury vehicle for a fraction of its market value. The president of the yacht club was now driving my father's prized possession to the exact same venue that had just revoked my parents' membership. A genuine laugh escaped my chest. It was a dark, brilliant twist of island society logic. The wealthy elite did not just exile my parents, they scavenged the wreckage. Edward funded his own escape from prison by selling his status symbol to the very man who banished him. It was a brutal, poetic justice. The traffic light turned green. I pressed the accelerator, leaving the intersection and the German sedan behind in my rearview mirror. I drove toward the Marine Research Facility, feeling the salty ocean breeze rush through the open windows. The physical and legal manifestation of my family's control was eradicated. They resided in a cramped apartment, hiding from the people who now wore their jewelry and drove their cars. I pulled into the laboratory parking lot and parked in my assigned space. I grabbed my canvas satchel and walked toward the heavy glass doors. My career remained intact. My sanctuary belonged entirely to me. I had protected my peace by enforcing a boundary they assumed I was too weak to build. The storm was over, and the horizon looked incredibly clear. The passage of time in the tropics is marked by the shifting winds and the subtle cooling of the coastal waters. 6 months drifted past the island shores, bringing a profound, undeniable clarity to my daily routine. The rainy season washed away the residual heat of the summer, and my life settled into a steady, rewarding rhythm. I stood at the head of the primary research laboratory on a Tuesday morning, reviewing a fresh topographical map of the Northern Reef System. The facility board appointed me as the lead director of coastal conservation in November. The promotion arrived alongside a $2 million federal grant designed to expand my underwater tracking initiatives. My days remained rigorous, but the heavy, suffocating weight that used to accompany my success had vanished. When my direct deposit cleared the first of the month, the numbers stayed exactly where I placed them. The secure holding company Cassandra established functioned like an impenetrable fortress. I no longer dreaded incoming phone calls. I no longer checked my legacy accounts, checking for unauthorized luxury purchases. My energy belonged exclusively to my research and my own well-being. With the new administrative position secured and the federal grant operational, I decided it was time to take the vacation I had paid for. I did not log on to the Oceania website. I had zero interest in grand suites, formal dining nights, or crowded swimming pools surrounded by people trying to prove their net worth. The pristine illusion of that specific luxury felt hollow. I wanted an experience grounded in reality and driven by authentic discovery. I booked a specialized marine expedition to the Galapagos Islands. The vessel was a high-end research hybrid, offering rugged luxury and direct access to pristine, untouched ecosystems. The itinerary included deep-water dives with hammerhead sharks, guided ecological tours of volcanic islands, and lectures from leading global conservationists. The cost rivaled the original cruise fare, but the value was tangible. I booked a twin cabin and sent the itinerary to Chicago. My Aunt Cassandra, the brilliant African-American corporate litigator who helped me secure my freedom, accepted the invitation within 5 minutes. On the day our flight departed Honolulu, the island experienced a humid, stifling heat wave. In the heart of Waikiki, Serena clocked in for her second consecutive retail shift. I did not need to see her to know exactly how her afternoon unfolded. The Island Gossip Network provided all the necessary updates. Serena stood behind a glass display counter, wearing her mandatory black uniform. Her flat shoes offered zero support for her aching arches. A tourist from the mainland tossed a stack of silk scarves onto the counter, demanding a different color palette. Serena swallowed her pride. She folded the silk, smoothing the edges with trembling fingers. She forced a polite, rigid smile, apologizing for the inconvenience. There was no trust fund waiting to rescue her. There were no hidden transfers from my bank account covering her rent. She earned her survival one grueling hour at a time. The influencer brand she valued above her own sister's dignity was a faded memory. Her followers had vanished the moment the steady stream of luxury content dried up. She was learning the true cost of money, and the lesson was uncompromising. A few miles away, Victoria sat on a folding nylon chair at a crowded public beach park. She no longer possessed the laminated membership card granting access to the pristine private cabanas of the Diamond Head Country Club. She sat surrounded by loud portable radios, chaotic family picnics, and the smell of cheap sunscreen. She attempted to strike up a conversation with a woman sitting on a nearby towel, complaining about the declining standards of island hospitality and the unbearable humidity. The stranger offered a polite, indifferent nod and turned away, refusing to engage. Victoria adjusted her oversized sunglasses, staring out at the water. She wore a faded pastel sundress that looked distinctly out of place among the casual beachgoers. She was a queen without a kingdom, talking to an audience that did not care about her past status. The elite social circles she once commanded had erased her from their registries. Edward remained inside their cramped commercial apartment, watching television on a small screen, far away from the harbor where he used to project his counterfeit prosperity. The consequences of their fraud had stripped them of their armor, leaving them to navigate a world they used to view with disdain. The air off the coast of Ecuador tasted different from the Hawaiian breeze. It was sharp, ancient, and entirely untamed. I stood on the steel observation deck of the expedition vessel, feeling the gentle roll of the dark blue water beneath the hull. The sun dipped toward the western horizon, casting brilliant streaks of gold and crimson across the open sky. The rugged silhouette of a volcanic island loomed in the distance, cutting a jagged shape against the fading light. Cassandra stood beside me, holding a ceramic mug of hot tea. She wore a heavy windbreaker, her sharp corporate posture relaxed in the face of the wild environment. The ocean wind whipped her dark curls around her face. "You earned this, Marina," Cassandra said quietly. Her voice carried over the sound of the churning wake. "We earned it," I replied, turning to watch a pod of dolphins breach the surface in the distance. The sleek gray bodies arched through the air before slicing back into the cold currents. The Hawaiian culture places a profound emphasis on ohana. For my entire life, my parents twisted that beautiful philosophy into a heavy, rusted chain. They demanded unconditional loyalty while offering zero respect in return. They viewed family as a rigid hierarchy where the highest earner was expected to blindly subsidize the favored child. They believed love meant paying the bill and looking the other way when the ledger did not balance. I realized, standing on that steel deck, that I did not merely recover $45,000. I purchased my liberation. The forensic audit, the yacht club confrontation, the permanent legal injunctions, they were all necessary steps to excise the rot. I had shattered the illusion that kept me trapped in a cycle of endless extortion. I took a deep breath, letting the cold, crisp air fill my lungs. I looked at Cassandra. She was not just my legal counsel, she was the family I chose. She understood the true meaning of mutual support and shared boundaries. Ohana does not require you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. It requires honesty, respect, and the courage to walk away from anyone who views your success as their personal property. The expedition ship sounded its heavy brass horn, echoing across the open water. We were sailing toward deep, uncharted territory, far away from the superficial constraints of suburban island life. The toxic dynamics of my past could not reach me here. The debt was settled, and the accounts were permanently closed. I leaned against the railing, smiling as the salt spray hit my face. The lingering ghost of the obedient, silent daughter was gone, replaced by a woman who knew exactly what her peace was worth. I felt a profound, unshakable sense of self-respect anchoring me to the present moment. The ocean was vast, the horizon was clear, and my future belonged entirely to me. There is a profound, silent tragedy in watching a family dismantle itself, not through a sudden catastrophe, but through the slow, methodical erosion of its own values. The story of Marina, a marine biologist who watched her parents hijack her hard-earned $45,000 anniversary gift to indulge her sister's hollow influencer fantasies, is more than a drama about stolen money. It is a mirror held up to the fracturing landscape of modern American family dynamics. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable realities of conditional love, the weaponization of loyalty, and the devastating cost of raising children for optics rather than character. If you find yourself navigating the murky waters of familial betrayal, or if you simply seek the courage to draw lines in the sand, welcome to Mourning Revenge, a space where we untangle the complexities of toxic dynamics and celebrate the quiet dignity of walking away. When we examine this narrative through the lens of traditional family structure and American parenting, a stark warning emerges. In a culture increasingly obsessed with curated digital aesthetics and hyper-consumerism, the fundamental duties of parenthood are often misplaced. Victoria and Edward, the parents in our story, represent a growing societal affliction, the prioritization of status over substance. They believed that providing a life of luxury for their golden child, Serena, was an act of parental love. In reality, it was an act of profound sabotage. By shielding Serena from the friction of hard work, by stealing from their independent daughter to fund the illusion of their youngest, they robbed Serena of the very tools she needed to survive the real world. True family responsibility is not about clearing every obstacle from a child's path. It is about holding their hand while they learn to climb. Honesty, fairness, and emotional awareness are the bedrock of any healthy traditional family. When parents play favorites, when they demand that the capable sibling set themselves on fire to keep the entitled sibling warm, they do not create a family. They create a parasitic ecosystem. The message for American parents is clear. Your greatest failure is not a lack of financial provision, but the theft of your child's struggle. When you teach a child that they are entitled to the fruits of someone else's labor, You are sending them into the world entirely unarmed. From Marina's perspective, the narrative offers a vital, life-saving message to today's youth. In a society that often weaponizes the concept of family first, young adults are frequently guilt-tripped into accepting abuse under the guise of duty. Marina's journey teaches us that setting boundaries is not an act of betrayal. It is the ultimate expression of self-respect. To the young people grinding in silence, building their lives brick by brick, while their families dismiss their efforts, your labor is your own. Your peace is not a currency to be spent on someone else's vanity. Independence is built on the cold, hard floor of reality, and true security comes from knowing you can survive the storm because you are the one who built the shelter. Stepping back, if we view this social reality through the eyes of a spiritual practitioner, one who observes the world not just through the laws of men, but through the eternal laws of nature and the soul, a deeper truth is revealed. Society is currently drowning in a severe drought of the spirit. We chase external validation, designer labels, and country club memberships, mistaking these fleeting shadows for genuine worth. The practitioner sees this reality and understands that the only way to heal the collective fracture is to turn inward. We must commit to the lifelong practice of self-cultivation. To navigate this modern wilderness, one must cultivate three essential pillars: wisdom, morality, and willpower. Wisdom is the clarity to see through the illusion. It is Marina recognizing that her parents' definition of love was merely a transaction. It is the ability to look at a polished, champagne-colored facade and recognize the rot eating at the foundation. Without wisdom, we are doomed to repeat the traumas of our ancestors, blindly accepting toxic behavior because it is wrapped in familiar packaging. Morality is the anchor of the soul. It is the choice to live with integrity, even when the world rewards the grifter. While Victoria and Edward lied, manipulated, and committed fraud to maintain their social standing, their moral decay ultimately orchestrated their own collapse. Cultivating morality means aligning your actions with truth, understanding that genuine happiness can never be built on stolen ground. Finally, there is willpower, the fortitude to act. Wisdom and morality are useless without the willpower to enforce them. It takes immense spiritual grit to look at the people who gave you life and say, "No more." It requires profound willpower to walk away from the familiar comfort of compliance and step into the lonely, terrifying expanse of true independence. Marina's ultimate victory was not the recovery of her funds, nor the public humiliation of her abusers. Her victory was the mastery of her own spirit. By refusing to be dragged into their spiritual decay, she broke a generational curse. She cultivated herself, finding peace in the rhythm of the ocean and the integrity of her work, rather than the approval of a broken system. We are universally taught that family is an unbreakable bond, a sacred covenant woven into our very DNA. We are told that blood is thicker than water, implying an infinite reservoir of forgiveness is owed to those who share our name. But perhaps this is the greatest, most damaging myth we inherit. The most profound lesson hidden in the wreckage of the Helen family defies conventional wisdom. Sometimes the highest form of love you can offer a toxic family member is the absolute unshielded consequence of their own actions. We are conditioned to believe that abandoning our family is a moral failure. But true moral failure lies in enabling the destruction of your own soul to preserve a counterfeit peace. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation, and love does not require your presence. Sometimes the only way to honor your roots is to cut them off entirely, realizing that you were never meant to be a branch on a dying tree, but the seed of an entirely new forest.